What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Atheist Roundtable, and it is TART Live Debate Night. I'm excited to see everybody in the chat already. So it's going to be a great debate. Two awesome gentlemen joining us tonight, JMike and David, and we'll bring them on screen here shortly. But I did want to make sure I plug tomorrow night, Saturday night. Infidel Noodle, former Muslim, is going to be joining us 9 p.m. Eastern time, and that's an interview, a discussion you don't want to miss. She's got an amazing story, and I think there's a lot that a lot of us can take away from hearing her share her story. And I also want to take a second to wish K Nevs a very happy birthday today, and I hope you enjoy your day with your family and your friends and everything. So big shout out to K Nevs, and let's not skip any more time. Let's get these guys on the screen. What's up, gentlemen?
What up?
Yo.
So first of all, thank you. You guys are very, very familiar faces to the Atheist Roundtable, so I won't go through.
What's the Atheist Roundtable?
These dumbasses started a YouTube channel. But David, we'll start with you. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself. Anything else you got going on?
Hey, well, my name is David. I like music, as you can see in the background. I don't know. I just do TikTok videos for now, at least. So just to kind of help with my verbal shorthand. So yeah.
So if you want to listen to David after tonight, you got to go listen to the Ticks and the Talks. That's what you got to do. Cool. Very good. JMike, Atheist Jesus, whatever they want to call you, right?
Well, maybe not for long, man, because I lost my monetization on TikTok because of responding to Islamic apologetics. So might not be Atheist Jesus at all. I might not have an account for very much longer, and all 14,000 followers just will be soon to be nothing at all. So we'll find out. But there's really not much for me to say other than I do not think that the Christian God exists, and I want to wish happy birthday to the awesome K Nevs. So yeah, and I'm excited to see everybody in Georgia. Hopefully, if things still pan out with the COVID things. So
I don't care if I have to take an underground fucking train. I'm going. But no, I'm excited for next week. Well, the topic of the evening: does the God of the Bible exist? And David, you are the affirmative. Oh, let me go through the format so everybody knows. So it'll be 10-minute openings, and then we're going to go straight to the open dialogue. It'll go 50 minutes or so, 55 minutes maybe. We'll see how it's going. Then 5-minute closings, and then we'll go to Q&A. So, gentlemen, thanks again for being on the Atheist Roundtable for another TART Live debate. And David, I'll jump off here, and then as soon as you speak, I'll start the clock.
Hello. Hey, get out of my spot, Mike. Move, dude. Jeez.
I can't do anything.
In my way. It's okay. You can still hear me. That's fine. I'll give you the spotlight just to, represent my belief better or something like that. I don't know. But okay. So my name is David, and the question, does the God of the Bible exist? Of course, I'm taking the affirmative today. So my answer is yes. And I'm going to say that today, I'm not saying that I can prove anything with 100% certainty, but I will be giving my reasons for why I believe that not only is the God of the Bible, that he exists, but that I would argue that he is really the only God that exists and that is worth worshiping and believing in. So let me start by saying that I'm going to be kind of abbreviating a lot of my arguments because I don't even know all the terminology. The best way I've heard it is, trying to explain it the way a 5-year-old can understand it. So for brevity, and because I don't know the terminology, I'm just going to be using the basic key talking points of some of these arguments that I've heard. And I actually do want to say something real quick that Mike said. So I tuned in, Mike, to the time that you were on Truth Wanted. And I stayed for a little bit until you started using a lot of big words and terms that I had no idea what you were saying. But one thing that you said that I caught at the beginning was something that I've actually heard repeated, which was that you've pointed something out that I think is worth noting with Christianity, which is that you've never heard someone become a Christian after hearing like a particular argument. And I know that Adam Rich has been on here before, and he said something that caught my attention too, which was that when he was asked, what's the number one reason why you believed in God? He said, well, it's not necessarily one reason. It's like a series of reasons. Like different things that you kind of, I guess you could say that you have an epiphany all of a sudden, like all of these things just kind of make sense all at once. And so I want to keep that mindset in mind, because I do think that with the more scientifically minded people, that it seems like the question of whether or not God even exists seems to be this 1 + 1 = 2, this very linear equation that they're looking for, which I guess would be more considered a direct evidence, which I'm sure Mike is familiar with the two main types of evidence, direct and indirect evidence. I would argue that science can prove that God exists, but not with 100% certainty. And I would say that the way science can prove God exists is indirectly, especially when you also incorporate the Bible and you consider the fact that the Bible was written in a time where science did not exist. Some of the things that are mentioned in the Bible that these people, in some cases, even admit that they don't understand it themselves, or things that they have explained to the best of their ability that we can actually kind of piece with science. The key takeaway from that is that these people, from my position, could not have known these things unless something revealed it to them. And the accuracy, at least, to which the people knew these things could not have been known unless, of course, the person who created it, I would argue, told them or showed them through what we would call a revelation or a vision or whatever. So let me start with, I'm going to be stealing some arguments that I've heard from Michael from Inspiring Philosophy. And if you guys want to hear more on this, I would encourage you to check out his channel. He does a much better job of explaining this. The arguments are long, but they are good. I'm going to start by arguing for what's called classical theism. And if I'm correct, classical theism basically states that God is an immaterial, necessary mind. So we have to kind of give some foundations for these things so that people can understand, at least have an idea of what I'm talking about when I say that, because this is obviously not a material thing. Science, of course, deals in the realm of the physical, natural, and observable. But of course, if God is immaterial, well, of course, he's not going to play by the same rules, you could say. That's why I said that God is proven indirectly. So the first thing that I want to say, that there are two arguments that he uses for classical theism, which is the cosmological argument as well as the digital physics argument. The digital physics argument can essentially be simplified in saying that essentially what science has discovered is that our universe operates very similarly to like that of a computer. Everything from the Big Bang to the distance between the CPU and I'm butchering probably some of this, the CPU or the screen and the information, if I remember correctly. So space kind of seems to be like this placeholder, so to speak. And the way that even the Earth began, or the universe began to exist with the Big Bang, according to some scientists, has actually been shown to actually resemble similarities between like how whenever you start up a computer or a video game, that there is a similar version of that same Big Bang in action. So that, along with the cosmic conscious argument, I think is what it was, the cosmological argument, which basically shows that not like the way that the cosmos are actually seems to actually very accurately and closely represent neurological structures in the brain. And if I remember correctly, that even space or something like that itself seems to actually exist as more like waves that actually collapse into a singular when they are observed, which supports that in the same sense that in a video game, whenever you're not looking at something, like when something is off your screen, it's not that it's not necessarily there, but whenever you observe it and there's a measurement that's taken that was shown through the double slit experiment, that the waves collapse and then form what you actually see. Now, of course, if those things already exist prior, something else has to be keeping those things there. That would, of course, be what I would call God, especially given that whenever we think about things, before we personally have a thought and we solidify it in our mind, it essentially exists as more of this unstable wave that needs to collapse into whatever your final thought of that thing is. And the universe basically seems to operate the same way. So let me see if there's so everything. So from there, I would say that that does support that what I call God exists. Now I'm sure that there's going to be, well, how do you know it's your God? How can we maybe more accurately define whether or not this is God or whose God that is? So we can maybe say that for the back and forth. But I do want to say this as well. With my particular belief, the reason why I would say that that reality can best be explained by Christian theism, and that this is the Christian God, is because of some things that are mentioned in the Bible. So first of all, as far as I know, Jesus Christ is the focal point of Christianity, and he was, as far as I know, the only human in history to ever make a claim such as, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. It's quite the claim to make for someone who is supposedly just a man. Now, assuming that the Bible is accurate and all that stuff, Jesus was a person who said he was God, and there were four main things that he basically showed that he was master over: the elements, sickness and disease, demons, principalities, or we could even just say bad ideas, and of course, life and death itself. Only the being that has authority over all four of those things, I would say, is worthy of being called God. And of course, if we're assuming that Jesus Christ did exist, which is historically backed up, in fact, even I think it was, I forgot the name, Antony Flew, I think it was. Before he died, he said that out of all of the miracle claims in existence, the resurrection of Jesus is the most evidentially supported one. So, of course, if we're talking just based on evidence and inference to the best explanation, not only is the Christian God probably the one that's true, but then if we go from there, and Jesus did, in fact, live and rise from the dead like he said he was, then everything that was written in the Bible is probably true as well with regards to the miracles that he did and the eyewitness testimony that I'm sure that Mike would have some disagreements on, of the written accounts that we have in the Gospels. I would argue that everything else can basically just be can be explained from there. Any further questions? Why is there deception? Why is there so many other gods? Why, I think that just based on that, we can say we can infer that the way that the universe, the space operates, represents a mind. That mind is God, and because God is basically in control of his faculties, this can explain everything else: miracles, all that stuff. And I'll try and I'm sure that questions will pop up more as we get into this, and so I'll do my due diligence to try and respond to any of Mike's questions and maybe see where he's coming from. But I think that for now, at least, is good enough for me to conclude my opening. So, oh, good, 1 minute left. So, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, I didn't have my screen up. So you're good? You don't need the extra minute, or you're good to pass it off?
Yeah. You're good, man. Go for it.
Cool. Before I do my opening statement real fast, I just want to say that the digital physics thing is something that there would be an objection there that I would want to, we could possibly go into, that would deal with more characteristics of physical symmetries like rotational symmetry and translational symmetry. So I don't know if that's a great example there, but I would love to maybe potentially get into that if we have time towards the end. But to start my opening statement, the Christian worldview is one that makes very bold claims about cosmological origin, human creation, events in history, metaphysics, morality, and what we can and cannot do without clothes on. The God associated with this worldview and the topic for tonight is a God that supposedly annihilated Amalekite infants in 1 Samuel 15:3, drowned the world in Genesis 6, killed a man for not impregnating his dead brother's wife in Genesis 38:7, and smited 42 boys with bears for calling a man baldy in 2 Kings chapter 2, 23 through 24. He later, for reasons, had to send his son, who was also himself violating the law of identity in the process, as a blood sacrifice to appease everybody for problems that he was responsible for creating. Now, for the record, I take the position that this God does not exist, not that I merely lack the belief in it. And as I mentioned, this God is defined by Christians often as a triune God with omni-properties. See John chapter 1, Psalm 33, Jeremiah chapters 23 and 32, as well as Matthew 5:48 for the admissions of these claims. These clearly create similar issues akin to presenting a one-ended stick or a squared circle. It's just logically incoherent. Despite this valid objection, I'm so confident that even if we disregarded these properties, we could still show this God hypothesis fails, and it is more likely that it in fact does not exist. The claims, the method employed, its proposed moral system, and the general understanding of antiquity help to do this all on its own. I think it's fair when evaluating these claims that we at least take it as a hypothesis in explaining the world around us. First thing that's striking to me is the lack of epistemic justification for even the deistic arguments and the subsequent implications posed for the theist that is postulating a very specific nature and intent to a God. So in that framework, we have a host of a priori arguments that all fail to substantiate the most integral task set out by its premises, a foundation necessitating a mind that gives way to intent. And while I find these arguments immensely important in philosophical discussions and debates, they often aren't even meant to get you to the favored God hypothesis with all its set of specific claims in the first place, and thus are useless for arguing in favor of Yahweh for tonight's debate. So what do we need to substantiate the claims proposed by the Christian worldview? Well, to start with, we should value a method that seeks to distinguish claims that are imaginative from claims that are actually reflective of reality. I would personally propose a method that wants to seek verification and make future predictions, not post hoc rationalizations. But my opponent, or any other Christian for that matter, is welcome to propose any other method of determining truth. If it has verified the truth for you, it should have no issue in verifying the truth for everyone else. So, if we are to take the proposition seriously, we should evaluate what is purported from the source. Well, as it turns out, the Christian is out of luck from citing original autographs, and from my account, it fails immediately in its demonstrable incorrect assessment of its origins to its end with Jesus, where he didn't rise, and confirmed Corinthians 15:14 when Paul says, "And if Christ had not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith." So let's start at Genesis 1, which, by the way, is stolen from the Enuma Elish dating back to 2000 BC. Well, we all know stars existed before the Earth, so that is just patently wrong. The introduction of land animals and insects misses the importance of single and multicellular life, showcasing the ignorant minds of primitive men. A global flood definitively never happened, which the geological strata plus rudimentary understandings of biodiversity proves this to be the case time and time again. And we also never spawned here like a video game. For the sake of the argument in regards to human origin, there wouldn't even be the genetic diversity required for proliferation of the species. And you don't even have to venture that far outside of near extinct populations to see the multitude of reasons why this claim fails. Also, speaking of the flood, the Tigris and the Euphrates are reported in Genesis both before and after the flood, evidently unaffected by the massive destruction. These claims in Genesis not only serve zero explanatory power in the fields of chemistry, biology, physics, paleontology, and a multitude of others, they are directly contradicted by these fields of study time and time again. Historically speaking, we know a mass exodus never occurred, men were never 900 years old, and Moses never even existed. So I now understand that most people argue that these are probably supposed to be taken as metaphors and that they shouldn't be taken literally. I can't think of a more obvious excuse than to pull the metaphor card. How do we differentiate what's a metaphor and what isn't? Why are metaphors only existent when we can definitively point out contradictions or mistakes? I could never say to my opponent, if we were wrong about the allele frequency changing over time in a population and that evolution was subsequently false, that it was just somehow a metaphor. He would rightfully think I was making an excuse or at least creating ambiguity in my claims. Furthermore, I couldn't think of a worse way to pass down the most dire message than through a series of metaphors or allegories. It would be like me warning my friend that I'm going to punch him in the face through a series of poems. This, to me, is what serves as the nail in the coffin for Christianity as a whole. And I don't just mean these claims being wrong in the Old Testament. I really want to point out and stress that the method employed here rivals every single religion that the Christian also thinks is wrong. If these other religions are false, why did the God choose the exact same methods of all the other false religions? Why choose to provide a method that would necessarily lack the valuable attestation and invite a host of manipulation problems like potential forgeries, translations from dead languages, unknown authors, missing text, so on and so forth? And this, honestly, is where the New Testament shines the brightest. A huge sticking point for the Christian is the fact that the New Testament is the most attested book in antiquity, and they are right. But they are wrong, but where they are wrong and why this is detrimental to their position is because majority of its attestation comes after the 9th century, nearly some 94% of the manuscripts. A typical counter to this is that because we have so many copies of Matthew and Mark, it proves it's reliable. This only serves to highlight the ignorance of their understanding of the manuscripts themselves. For one, our first manuscript is P52, which contains a few verses from John 18 dating after 200 CE, and a full copy of Mark dates 350, some 300 plus years after Jesus' death. We have no grounds to assert reliable attestation from the copies that are based on centuries of mistakes. The counter argument for the Christian only gets worse when we actually compare the variants. For example, does it affect the reliability looking at Mark 16, 9 through 20, a verse about drinking poison and handling deadly snakes? A verse, mind you, which all scholars agree is a forgery. Does it affect reliability that there's tons of scribal errors, like the story of the woman taken in adultery, which scholars agree Jesus never actually said what was purported there? Should it matter that there was never a census under Quirinius as per Caesar Augustus, as depicted in Luke? Every bit of our inquiry into these claims can only grant us abductive assessments of what is most likely, and this is often what's propped up for the resurrection story. We have nothing to appeal to grant the likeliness of a bodily resurrection or anything supernatural for that matter. And by default, the proposition that it was made up or that Jesus was a liar is way more likely because we have implicit evidence that people lie or are mistaken. You don't have to go much farther than all the false prophets that the Christian already believes in or doesn't believe in. But let's think about this. If someone presented you a book of claims that claims to have the answers to the fundamental nature of reality, would it be considered valid or reliable if the comparison of the 5,700 manuscripts are inconsistent, housing over 300,000 variants in the text? How about if all of its origin claims are demonstrably false? How about if every issue you raised was just dismissed by a metaphor? How about if the central figure lacks any contemporary evidence and isn't mentioned until 80 years after his death? I'd make a guess that you might not buy into the validity of that text for any other religion. And at some point, given the consistently wrong biblical claims are, and how they do not reflect reality in any way, we should have no issue citing on Yahweh being entirely imaginary, just like Zeus or Odin. And we should all rejoice that we find that this isn't the world we find ourselves in. Thank you.
Damn, son.
Damn.
What? And was so earlier when you were saying we have the Machine Gun Kelly of atheism coming in to spit the fire, you were talking about JMike. I didn't know who you were talking about.
Yeah, and I tried to tell him, like, dude, don't bring the smoke. Don't bring that smoke. And he was like, nah, they call me Machine Gun Kelly.
He brought that smoke. You know, I see David Gonzalez, David G, you know, the G-Man. And he says he's going to go off on some of IP's rhetoric, right? And I almost wanted him to play the drums. You know, he's got the drum kit in the background. I almost wanted to get some of that, you know, going. But nonetheless, JMike came in, guns a-blazing. He's coming in hot. He's not taking any prisoners. And I feel like he's brought his A game today. What do you think?
Yeah, and then we're getting ready to go into the open dialogue, and this is where it gets juicy. So,
juicy.
David G could turn on and drop some bombs on him,
like up from above, like little Christian rhetoric bombs from a little Spitfire plane from the early World Wars.
That could be, or maybe even earlier than that.
I see David as a little fighter pilot. What you think?
Yeah, dropping
little nuggets of wisdom on JMike, but JMike like swatting them away because he ain't having none of it because he don't want none of that theism bullshit. You know what I'm saying?
Faith is bullshit.
Faith is a whole lot of dookie, right? Hey, shout out to everybody in the crowd tonight. We got Geo Sam that says, "Hey, look, this ain't nothing to laugh about. You know, when you're talking about stories of the supernatural and claims of divinity, it's no laughing matter." And I say, LOL to that, young sir. But needless to say, let's get on with this show, Oz. What do you reckon?
Yeah, let's do it. So round two. So everybody watching, we're going to go to open dialogue. It'll go about 50 minutes or so. And JMike will let you, David will let you start the open dialogue. Let's get to it.
All right. Oh, okay. I saw that.
It was, you know, it was what it was.
All right, so I want to start off. So here's one thing that I have noticed about the conversation in general, with the ones between theist and atheist. I will obviously agree that I am starting with my, I guess you could say, my epistemology from, or I guess I should go this way, from this side, and you're starting your epistemology from this side. So I see things working backwards that makes sense. And maybe I don't know some of the in-betweens, and you're starting from the ground up, right? So there is...
well, can I get a clarification on that? Like,
yeah, okay, so
what do you mean, like I want to make sure when you say that, are you taking like a presuppositional approach there, or an evidentialist approach? Like,
it's not a... Okay, so it's a presuppositional approach from the perspective that I believe God is real. Now, I'm trying to work my way to you using I guess you could say a similar style of how you do things, because I'm trying to, so I'm coming at it from this angle, you're coming at it from this angle, you're going this way, or I'm sorry, this, I have my things backwards here. You're working your way up this way to see if what I'm saying up here is true. I'm up here, I already believe this is true. I'm trying to work my way back down to you so that hopefully you can start seeing how all of these things start kind of coming together.
Yeah, but what stops you from starting anywhere? Like, why did you start there, right? Like, because if we're going ground up, then how did you skip all these other steps and get to the top?
Okay,
four, right?
So this is the focal point of the gospel, and as the Bible says, it is the power unto salvation. So I know that for you, it wouldn't be. That's what I would have to help you get to. Now you have to first believe that to believe in, right? If you don't even believe that God exists, well, then you're not going to believe in God.
Well, so let me ask you. I'm sorry to cut you off, but it sounds like you're starting your epistemic justification off by saying that, like, you have to start believing in it, right? Because I would is that what you're saying?
You have to first accept that God exists. Yeah. So this is, I think this is also a confusion that happens real quick. A lot of people seem to think that being a Christian simply means that you believe that God is real. Even the Bible says even demons believe and they tremble with fear. The gospel, the focal point of Christianity is not whether or not you believe that God is real. It is whether or not you believe that God is real and that he did something for you, which of course is what the message of the cross is through the person of Jesus Christ, which we have historical evidence for. So I have heard the gospel, and I would say that it has changed my life. And so I have done what the Bible says to do for someone who believes that God is real and they want to, you could say, account for their sins before God. And I have done so. And I have seen that there is evidence in my life that is real. Now,
let's take it a point at a time if we can. Change your life. It changed your life.
Yes.
Star Trek: The Next Generation changed my life, right? So
okay,
how is that like? Yeah, you know, I'm not saying that to be facetious, but like,
no, I know.
If we use uniqueness or it changed
yes.
my life, like, I don't value that in my epistemic justification for truth, and so that's where we're gonna butt heads really quickly.
Yeah, well, let me explain what the gospel is first real quick so people understand. So the gospel is essentially, and this is what I would say is what sets Christianity apart from the rest, a lot of other religions, that God doesn't care about you, that God has made, you know, a standard that you have to achieve and earn and attain. The beauty of Christianity is that I think it's a verse in Psalm. Psalm says that God is close to everyone. We all speak a moral language, and that is, I think, where God always revolves around. It doesn't matter where you go in the world. And so with that, we all recognize that we have what we call a conscience. It is a non-physical thing that essentially it's like when you know you did something wrong.
Yeah, quality experience.
Yeah, that'll be the label that you use. And so because we all recognize this, God is easily accessible to anyone. And all he simply says is that you acknowledge your sin, that there's a standard that you violated and that it's his. And that when the Bible says, the word uses the word repent, which can mean just change your mind. That can mean, maybe change your mind about your approach, change your mind about your sin, all of the above. But it essentially means that you recognize that there's something wrong and that you've done something wrong and that you turn to God and you confess your sin to God. And then in faith in what Jesus did for you, you put your faith in him. In other words, the Bible talks about sin as though it's a debt. It is a big debt that needs to be paid off, but we can't pay it off. And so what Jesus did, because he is an eternal being, he is able to pay off. It's called substitution.
Well, so I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm very
No, go
familiar
ahead.
with the Christian religion. Like scriptural analysis and things like that's very fun to me. Like we can get into a lot of that. So like I already understand the story very well in that
Right.
regard. I want to know how you know it's true. Like starting with it doesn't make sense. And someone made a very good I was having a conversation with somebody, or I watched something, and someone made a very good point with this. It's like as if we're dropped off on an island, and I am starting at a spot of, well, I know I'm on the island. Let's try to like work our way up to why we're on the island. Whereas you're starting with, we're on the island and Yahweh dropped us off, right? But you could sit there and tell me that like, well, Yahweh has this and there's that, like, but that doesn't tell me, that doesn't validate any epistemic justification there. You have to actually provide something that's going to show me or separate this from just being in your head versus this actually being the case, right?
Yeah, well, then that's why I'm saying I'm starting from at least, okay, so I'm kind of up here with what I believe I know, and I'm trying to also start from the ground up with where you're at, so that hopefully we can maybe intersect. That's why I'm starting with, that's why I started with the arguments I gave, because I think that those arguments already in and of themselves already show that we exist in some shape, in some kind of, I mean, even if I fuse the cosmological and the, I'm not saying that either argument on their own gives the perfect picture, but when you take the digital physics and the cosmological argument, when you kind of mix them together, the point of intersection, I would argue, suggests that we either exist in either some kind of mind or computer-like reality, and that has implications behind it.
So I would need to know what you would have to, like, I would hope that you would have like at least a syllogism here to go with where the premise of the mind is being substantiated. Because from my perspective, you say the Kalam cosmological argument. Well, it's a non sequitur from that standpoint to even say that that's indicative of a God at that point, because that's not what the conclusion even says.
Was that the Kalam? Oh yeah.
The Kalam just states that the universe has a cause.
No, that's not that. I'm sorry if I misspoke. The argument that I used, it wasn't the Kalam. I might have misspoke on what the actual argument was. It was some cosmological argument. It's not the Kalam. It's one that shows that the cosmos essentially resemble.
But David, if you have an argument for God, does it not seem problematic that you can't remember what the argument is?
No, because I'm explaining what I saw. Actually, this is actually how the Bible was written. Essentially, the Bible was written in a time where people remembered things by oral tradition, so they could memorize even entire books. But usually, whenever they were teaching messages, they found ways to summarize. And I'm just saying, it feels like you're trying to take issue with whether or not I can remember the specific terms, rather than whether or not you're actually trying to listen to what I'm saying behind the information that I'm giving you. If I tell you I don't know what the argument is, but the argument, the scientific evidence shows that the universe operates like a mind, I mean, do I need to get the terminologies correct, or isn't that kind of enough?
Well, I don't really care about the terminologies. I care about, like, when we look at the host of premise, like, right, we'll have an argument, right, and we'll look at it, we'll have we'll look at the structure, and I'll just grant, even though I don't even know what it is, that it's probably a valid structure, probably not, but it doesn't have any issues there. But I care about whether or not the premise is sound. And the premise that matters here is the substantiation of a mind. So in my opening statement, I had mentioned that these deistic arguments can't even get the most integral in all of them, whether it's you go with phasers, actualized, whether you go with the unmoved mover, whether you go with any of modal ontological arguments, whether you go with any of these types of arguments, they don't substantiate that the necessary foundation is of a mind, right? Because I'm a naturalist. I agree with contingency issues. I agree that there's a necessary foundation and contingent things that arise. But at no point do I have this extra premise of the mind. That is the extra premise that you would have to substantiate. But even then, it's like that doesn't get us to Yahweh, which is what the topic of the debate is for.
Well, I'm trying to take you step by step, because if the thing is that if I essentially can't get you to, so let me explain my position, okay? Whether I'm right or wrong, the point is that the arguments that I'm giving would show that there is a God. So if there is a God, then everything that would follow from my premise would also have to be true, and I could show how that would be the case, right? If we're talking about the cosmos reflecting neurological brain structures and acting like a mind, well, if that's true, then the only thing that from there would have to follow is, does my worldview make the most sense out of what I call God? And if we have this person called Jesus, who is in clear control of everything, well, that would make sense, because if we, for example, if we exist, whether it's in some kind of computer program or in the mind of God, I mean, you can essentially do this yourself, right? You can think about this yourself.
But it's a composition. This is just like a textbook billboard for a composition or fallacy of composition or division, depending on how you look at it. You're looking at things like a computer, and then inferring the whole based upon its part, right? Like you couldn't do that. Like you couldn't go to Walmart and see a family and like, it's a family. And then you look at another group of people and go, well, I'm going to infer that that's also a family. It could totally not be, right? Like you can't infer just based on the parts that the whole is necessary, that the whole necessarily follows, because that's the entire part of the premise I'm going to reject to and say it's not sound, is that you're not actually substantiating the mind part there.
So what would you, okay, so if science shows us essentially that the mind operates like the universe, what would be a better reason? What would be a better?
I don't think it does at all. I don't see anywhere where we could replicate a pineal gland and say that the universe is secreting melatonin over in this section.
Oh, I see. Okay,
but even then, like when you go into the digital physics argument, like what I was saying kind of towards the beginning of my opening statement, or before the opening statement, was that the way that you look at how, like, the extant models of digital physics, they're not compatible with the continuous characteristics of actual physical symmetries, like rotational symmetry, or I think it's called Lorentz symmetry, or transitional symmetry. So it does, like, that's why it is a fallacy of composition, because when we actually compare it to these things, it doesn't stand up to the analogy that you're trying to
well, that's why I'm saying, like, I don't think that these arguments alone can give you the full picture. That's why I think metaphysics and philosophy is important. But what I'm saying is that even if all of the variables aren't accurate, I mean, you have two arguments that work side by side each other pretty well. And if we're just, when we're talking about knowledge, usually we keep working our way up. So if I have this one argument that I think best represents reality, and then this other argument that's not the same argument that also seems to have some credibility, there's going to be points of intersection between those two arguments that keep taking you up. And then, you have these two arguments, there's a point of intersection, but then you have these other two arguments and a point of intersection. So now those 2 points are now the next level up. And then those 2 points have more points of intersection of things that overlap and tie, and you kind of work your way in. That's kind of
I would argue that would be some form of post hoc rationalization, but let's do this. Let's just pretend that the theistic argument can get you to a God, because the debate for tonight is whether or not the Christian God exists. Yeah. So let's just say that the God, that maybe this argument, an a priori argument here, can get you there, right? I don't think it does. I don't think I agree in a priori truths, right? Like math. I don't think a priori arguments, I don't think you can sit in your chair and then determine God exists. I think that's a flaw that a lot of people who get into philosophy make. Especially when you don't substantiate the premise that matters, necessitating a mind and foundation. For that, you would need to find some disembodied mind, potentially. We only know of physical minds being a physical emergent property. So it's like, I don't know what it is that we appeal to. But even if we pretend, if I start with that Krishna is the real God, or Vishnu, or whatever God, I can make those lines intersect the same way you do by just giving a post hoc rationalization, right? So like my thing is like, let's just start with your epistemic foundation from that point, right? Like, what is it that now you can get to Yahweh, or you can get to that? Because it just seems kind of arbitrary in the same way that I could just assert a law or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm learning a lot myself, and I understand like how, science works, epistemology, and they have to do things this way. What I'm saying is that, again, this is what makes the Christian God accessible. He speaks a language that we all know. He can be found by anyone who wants to know that he's real. He's not bound to you having to first prove him. In fact, if we're talking about a personal God, which I believe he is, then I would suggest that perhaps he might also incorporate possibly anecdotal evidence for the individual, because he's a personal God. And so I get the importance of science, but I think that if you
what do you mean anecdotal though? Anecdotal for the person.
So like a personal experience.
Yes, but you're saying so. Okay, so you're saying that it would be like the experience would actually happen to the person, but you're just saying the anecdote would be from them to me, essentially, is what you're saying.
Yes. So like the gospel message is set, right? Like that's not going to change. The gospel is that applies to everyone, but that's the conclusion that people should come to after knowing God is real. But the way that they come to that knowledge or come to that understanding might vary. I mean, for example, according to the Bible, Jesus appeared to the other 11 disciples or 10 disciples, and then Thomas shows up later, and they all say, "Hey, we saw Jesus." And Thomas was like, "I don't believe you guys." And he said, "Until I see him myself, until I put my hand on his side and see the holes in his hands, I will not believe." And then Jesus showed up to him, and he gave him that.
If we beg the question and assume that it actually happened, though, right? That's
correct. But what I'm saying is that this is where, okay, so I think that the fundamental issue with your epistemology is that what you're trying to do is get a hold on an infinite mind. And the reason why you're not going to find God if you have to prove every aspect of God before you can reason your way to God is because if you're going to create an epistemology that says until I understand the ontology of God, or that if God is proven to everyone first through science, then I'll believe. That first of all, it doesn't seem like a very personal God. And this is just the way I view God. I believe that if God exists, that he's not going to make you believe, first of all. And so if a person's belief is reserved based on consensus, well, then the unfortunate thing with Christianity is that now your faith is in people, not in Jesus. And if your faith is in people, then you're going to listen to what people have to say. But God is the one who's trying to pull us out of that. Okay, I know. You're.
Well, I'm just saying that's what like a snake's oilsman would say to somebody, that like if it doesn't work, like it's because you didn't believe that it didn't work, right? Like these are like the tactics used by con men. These aren't the tactics used by people that are actually providing some kind of justification for the beliefs that they have. It's these only like you couldn't show me an example at which somebody is like, just believe, the evidence is probably not there, but it's true. It's like that doesn't happen. That only happens when people are lying or when they're trying to perpetuate a story that they think is true, right?
Let me work off that example. Okay, so let's say you have a salesman. Does that person have a track record? Like on Amazon, when you go to Amazon, do they have, I know we don't like literally have one, but do they have a good track record? Can you see their reviews? Because that would be actually where like the disciples and Christians come into play, right? We would be like the metaphorically.
No, it wouldn't. They're also part of the same. Like the book itself is anecdote, right? Like what you're saying is that the disciples would be able to be used would like. That'd be like me presenting you a biology book and saying, "Hey, evolution is true. Just read the biology book." I would be making a mistake there because that's not the way to prove evolution is true. I would say, "Hey, let's go look. Allele frequencies change over time." But if you were to say like, "Hey, we don't see this macroevolution here," and I said, "Well, it's okay because it says so in the biology book that macroevolution is true," right? Yeah. Like that would you're still appealing to the same anecdote. That isn't the independent evidence. That's still part of like the part that's not independent, right? That's like you can't use the claim to prove the claim. This is the problem with the 500 witnesses. The 500 witnesses isn't 500 witnesses. It's just an anecdotal claim, and the plural of anecdote is not more evidence.
No. Okay, yeah. So this is why I will say this, okay? Because I do believe obviously that evidence is important. And this is something that's very difficult to explain. So at the end of the day, it will eventually come to faith in God, but it's for a reason, by reason. It's not just belief because no reason. In fact, I can point you to multiple Bible verses, and I can actually probably rebut any verse that someone tries to use to say that God just wants you to believe in him for no reason. I mean, I just pointed to Thomas, for example. And you might just need more evidence like Thomas.
Well, my thing is, how do you even know that this was a thing with Thomas, right?
Okay.
That's the issue, because when I look at things like Mark, so like, I don't know if you know what docile reproduction is. I think we've talked about it before on the show. It's also known as editorial fatigue. But so you have this idea of, it's like a concept of where when we look at the Bible, we can try to get a picture of it. This will be similar to like you watch a movie and you see like in one scene, the guy's got like a 5 o'clock shadow, and the next one, it's not there anymore. Right. It's like, well, now you kind of have a picture of how to build it. And so I'm not going to present these contradictions to say that this proves the Bible false. But what I would do is say, we look at Mark 6, for example. This is the story of Herod Antipas beheading John the Baptist. Same story is in Matthew 14. In Mark, he calls him a king, right? That's not true. Herod Antipas was not a king. You can just Google it real quick. Everybody go Google it. Not a king. He was a tetrarch. The difference between the tetrarch and the king is that he was a ruler of like a territory of 4, right? And so there's a distinct difference there between a ruler of all. Matthew understands this change and changes it. And we know that Matthew changed it, right? We can tell that this is the case because we use this literary resource called docile reproduction to paint a picture of what came first. Almost nearly all scholars agree that Mark came first. And the point that I want to draw to this is when you say things like Thomas or these people said this, but when we actually look at the comparison of things, because of docile reproduction, we can paint a picture of how the manuscripts were changed, how we know Jesus didn't say X, Y, or Z, how we know that things within Thomas were manipulated or changed. So my question is, with all of those, with the 300,000 variants that you're going to have between the two, how can you even be sure that the thing with Thomas is even reliable to the original autograph that would be, the best that you would have? Like, how can you do that?
Okay, so
and for the debaters, just know everything was in the private chat. We were building up to that. So if you were caught off guard, watch the private chat. But Pasta, hashtag Jesus is a myth.
He's apparently a myth. That's what I've been hearing. And who better to deliver that news than the CEO of mythicism himself, Ozzy, the kamikaze. That's what they call him.
Kamikaze.
Hey, shout out to Chris Ullery in the chat. Just popped in a little bit late. He may want to go back and rewatch the opening because JMike and our house theist, David G, gave quite an interesting opening there. So, Chris, when you get a chance, rewatch. And Chris and I recently had a chat while we ate some pizza. And if you guys want to check that out, I'm dropping this in the chat here. So don't forget to check out the new episode of Atheist Pizza featuring Chris Ullery, where he destroyed me about his beliefs in God. But I did enjoy some of that Atheist Pizza, though. So what you reckon so far, Ozzy?
These are the ones where obviously I love David. I respect him, but this is where I think it's the theist position on trying to demonstrate a God is so difficult.
It's a tough one, right? But JMike, he hasn't pulled back yet, man. He's
one thing I will JMike is, like I said from the top, has been a machine gun. What I will say, one thing I do, all the debates David's done with us so far, that dude is relentless. Like he doesn't cower, he doesn't bow down. He just keeps, if you want to say on the attack, or attacking the topic. I do have to tip a cap for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, big fan of David G. Also, shout out to JMike's ghostwriter, Cease to Know in the chat. Doesn't get enough credit for writing all JMike's material because JMike. Otherwise, let's just face it. Honestly, he'd be a blibbering, fool up here. But other than that, let's get on with this last little close here, where apparently I can see into the future. David G is going to whip a God out of his back pocket and prove everyone wrong. So,
oh shit! All right, tell everybody to tune in. Tell them to come to the Atheist Roundtable. We're fitting to meet our maker.
Let's get.
Yeah, so David, I want you to be able to respond to that, but if you don't remember because of the break, just let me know and I can fill in parts. But I think it's pretty general that you got it.
Yeah, if you could nutshell the question for me real quick. I was about to start answering it.
Sure, yeah. So kind of given the literary thing of the docile reproduction where we kind of build this structure of how things worked, we can use that to look at the manuscripts and go, hey, these things don't line up. There's differences here. So how can you even be sure about whatever it is that you're appealing to? Whatever.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I will. So like I said, the knowing that God exists essentially hinges on the gospel. Now, to answer your question specifically first, real quick, this is where I don't mean that I'm actually quoting someone here. So this isn't, I'm not trying to insinuate something other than I think that perhaps an individual might have to just rethink their methodology. History and science are not the same thing. And the Bible does say that God will preserve his word. The Bible specifically says that the Bible is essentially just useful for, teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness. It doesn't claim to be a scientific book, although there are some things that I would say do overlap with science. But this is why I brought up oral tradition, because the message for Christians, the Bible is predominantly for Christians. The message that God has for people, for Christians, for people who are already in Christ, the things in the Bible are only meant to support the message of God with regards to his message and all that stuff. And we are the spokespersons, so to speak, of God in that we proclaim the gospel. And this is something that I told Jeff before. If you don't even believe the gospel, none of this stuff is going to make sense to you. You can understand some things of it, sure. But the thing is that with these contradictions, there are some contradictions in the Bible. Like, there's the thing of Jesus and there was a robe that they put on him. 2 people said it was purple. Someone else said it was red. So yeah, people did misspeak. Like I even misspoke today, but you still get the gist of what I'm saying. You know that I'm not intentionally trying to lie to you. And with what the purpose of the Bible was, I'm going to say that I'm going to expect to see some things that may not perfectly line up. But I mean, even by standards of evidence, that's just more evidence that the Bible was not susceptible to collusion. So the Bible is infallible in what the message of what it is supposed to say is, and it's not going to necessarily have every single thing 100%. But that's why I brought up oral tradition, because even
sure, I would agree that I don't expect the 100%. So
yeah, and even with your thing with like King Herod, people also misspoke. Like I think what I've heard from that question that you brought up, for example, this is why historic evidence is important and understanding texts, is that I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but you'll get the gist of it. Whenever you said King Herod was called a king, King Herod was also like a person that was.
I'm specifically referencing Herod Antipas, not like
Herod.
Well, there's a lot of Herods, right? So I'm specifically referencing Herod Antipas. He was not a king. He was a tetrarch.
Right, but didn't the wording of the text say something like under the rule of him or something like that?
So the wording, this is where we know the editorial fatigue comes into place, right? So
okay,
Matthew, and so if anyone's got their Bibles out, Matthew 14 is kind of when this Mark 6 story is being repeated. But the problem is that in Matthew 14:9, Matthew leaves this verse in there. It's the king was deeply grieved. Now, first off, there's a real whole issue with the stories of why he would be grieving, and that's a whole different story that isn't really relevant. But the fact that that Matthew calls him the king again instead of saying tetrarch like he had several times before is because that's the editorial fatigue. He's become overwhelmed in his source, which is Mark. He's taking things out of Mark. He does this again with the story of the leper, right, where there's this line where he heals the guy with leprosy, and he says, "Well, hey, if you run off and tell nobody." But in Matthew, he introduces large crowds at the very beginning of the story, and then you see he's like, "Hey, run off and don't tell anybody," because he forgets that he's being overwhelmed in his source. And I'm not using it to say like this contradicts things. What I'm saying is that we know the structure of that. Mark was first, Matthew, and then we can even use Matthew and Luke to say Q source is entirely bullshit. And when we do that, what we can do is then look at the manuscripts and see how they were changed, right? And so that's the issue here. Is like if we see that there's deliberate change, you have to take into the fact that 94% of these come after the 9th century. So we have hundreds of centuries. We have no clue. And when we match up with the 6% of those, we see drastic differences. And that's how we know. It's like, it's the most attested thing, but it's like the least well attested thing in antiquity.
Okay. So to that, I'll just say, because I don't want to get too off topic. Obviously, I think that, I think that trying to best understand, the what's true and what's not true is good. But again, if these contradictions don't necessarily pertain to the message of the Bible, which again, you would have to, I know this is something that you don't believe in, but I do believe in the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ and in God the Father. And the Bible is very clear. And I understand where you're coming from in saying that this sounds like a snake oil salesman. I don't expect you to believe me. That's why I want you to keep looking into this. But you can't, there are some things in the Bible that you cannot understand unless you have, I would want to call it the Holy Spirit. I know you don't believe in that. I'll put a different label on it and say, unless you have a different perspective of what the Bible is and what Christianity is. And I don't think that you can truly understand what that is unless, of course, you are saved through the gospel. And so are we doing closings or what are we doing right now? I just wanted to answer your question real quick.
Oh, I thought we were just doing the second part of discussion.
Oh, okay, the second part. Yeah. So I want to piggyback off something that you said. I wanted to answer this. I'm trying to get to your questions that I'm really enjoying this. But you said, okay, so I agree with you, right? Your thing, okay, it's not true because the book says so, the science book says so, the science says that.
Yeah, evidence is independent.
So because it's true.
Well, I'm saying that the Bible is the claim, the biology book's the claim, the evidence is allele frequencies changing over time, looking at the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium and being able to tell different levels of evolution, right? Like those are the independent things, right?
Okay, yeah. So here's how I would say that you can know. Okay, now it is a strange methodology for a non-believer. I will admit that, but this is how you can know. Okay, if you want to know. Okay, I mentioned the gospel. I mentioned sin. I mentioned that Jesus came to die on behalf of sinners. He lived the perfect life, died the death we deserve. Here's how you can know. Here's how I know. This is how I believe that I know in the one true God and that he's true. Okay. I know it's going to sound cheesy to you. It's not going to make sense. You're probably going to think it's dumb, but this is how I know. Now, whether you believe me,
don't worry about the whole me believe you. Just tell me what it is that you believe.
So since the gospel revolves around this thing called sin, and sin is essentially kind of like crime, doing something that you know is wrong, sin leaves what we call shame or guilt or something like that. Right. Now, if you let's say you have a friend who, you don't know that they are sensitive to like people touching them. I actually worked with a guy like this who I didn't know this prior to him telling me, right? He did something good and I gave him a pat on the back and he kind of, he kind of jerked away and then he said, "Hey man, I don't like being touched," right? Prior to him telling me that, I did not know that he didn't like being touched.
Sure.
Now, and so I respected his command. Now, I will agree. I believe that, everyone, like I said, everyone speaks the same language, the moral language. And even I'll agree with that. Even atheists don't need a belief in God to recognize morality. But I would say that when you do what the Bible calls sin, that there is something that seems to kind of be telling you, hey, I didn't like that you did that. That is what I would say is God. Now, so
I'm not going to say, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm not going to say that I disagree in a sense of that there's something to recognize, but I'm a moral realist and an atheist. I don't call that God though, right?
No, I know. I'm just saying, I'm answering your question as to how you can know that it's God. I'm giving you the answer to that question. That's what I'm answering, by the way. Sorry, I should have clarified. So the way that I would say that I do know, I can't say with 100% Cartesian certainty. I understand that. I would say 99% Cartesian certainty is in the same way that if you do something against someone and they tell you, "Hey, I don't like it when you do this," you do kind of feel bad for what you did. And you say, "Hey, I'm sorry that I did that." Right. When according to the gospel, when you confess your sin, when you acknowledge to God that you offended him, even if you don't know exactly who he is, you can say, "Hey, God, I believe you're out there. And I believe that what I did is bad." That's why I said that God is easily accessible to anyone at any time. That you will experience forgiveness, right? Now, if you are someone who has done something wrong, and you have apologized to the person for what you did, you are asking them for forgiveness. Now, forgiveness is not something that you can receive unless they say, "Hey, I forgive you." If they don't forgive you, you're going to know because they're going to show some kind of body language. They're going to tell you to screw off, whatever the case may be. And you're going to feel that guilt of that. The way that I would say I know, the way that you can know that everyone who I believe is a Christian does know is that they recognize that God's law is on our hearts, like the Bible says, and that when we have sinned, that has left us.
Yeah, Romans 2:15.
And so whenever someone accepts the gospel, that's why I said that being a Christian is not a mere belief that God exists. It's part of the equation, but it's one half of the equation. And then they hear about the person of Jesus who basically he atoned for their sin and he died on their behalf. that when you ask for forgiveness, that you will experience that. And I would say that I would argue that with the cosmics, the cosmos, and how they function, like, a wave that represents the mind. That was an argument that I forgot to actually give. I'll give it here in a second. That you cannot be forgiven by someone whom you have not offended. And so that is for me as a Christian, that is how I know. And so I understand. Okay, I get it.
Yeah, but I know, but so like you said, I know, but everything that you said, I don't see how the conclusion follows if we were to put this in a syllogistic structure. It's like, I see these things, I don't explain. Like, to me, it's just like a personal incredulity. It's just like, it's not X, it has to be Y, right? Like, I can't imagine it being this, or an ignorance aspect of like, I'm going to fill in the gaps there, because I don't have when you look at those things and you say it's related to that, I still think that's a fallacy of composition. I think you're looking at the wave and then you're saying that, but
I know,
but like, there's a lot of things you could look at and extrapolate. Like, you could do this this is why people believe in numerology, right? Like, they do things with numbers that can convince people of conspiracies and things. Like, you can do this. What it's called is it's called pareidolia. It's what we're all affected by. We're pattern-seeking primates, right? And so I don't think that that's good enough in that sense. Like, if you're, okay, so I guess let me ask you this way.
Sure.
And I'm not a mythicist at all, right?
Okay.
When it comes to Jesus, I want to kind of lead this into this.
You better not be. Your name's Atheist Jesus.
Right? I'm not a mythicist, but but when you come to these kind of things and we go look at the actual evidence in terms of like, because you relate these things that are the case. If my central figure of my religion had no contemporary sources, in fact, not a single mention in any Greek or Roman non-Christian source, including politicians, philosophers, historians, or even religious scholars. The first source comes from the year 112, 80 years after his death, from Pliny the Younger, I think it's the Younger, which was stemming on a council dealing with Christians. It was like in passing, right? When you look at these and when you reach for all these things in the cosmos and that have nothing to do with Jesus, but when we actually go to Jesus and we see like all these like issues with like, like I said, I'm not a mythicist. I think it's cool, but he exists, but we're only using the Bible to prove this.
Right. Well, can I add something? So
is that not a problem, like for you in the worldview? Because you have to go to these things that are unrelated to Jesus. We don't go to actually like, here's how we haven't talked about his resurrection at all. You know what I'm saying? Like, we haven't even gotten there. We've gone to like the cosmos and all these unrelated things that seem like trying to fit the puzzle pieces together. That's just my perspective.
Right. Okay. Well, so this was the point that I was trying to kind of illustrate. Bear in mind that when the Bible was written, that again, we didn't have science. Now, there are some things that are written in the Bible that you have to wonder, these people kind of got some things right, whether it was by accident or otherwise. Like, for example, I don't remember what the reference is, but I know you know the verse, but it says, by faith we understand that God made the universe out of that which is not seen to form that which is seen. And now 2,000 years later, whether it be atoms, molecules, particles, they said, look, by faith, I don't understand what I either just saw or was told or whatever it was, but I trust that this is God. And I don't know how this works, but by faith, I'm still trusting that this is God's universe.
Okay, that's fine. You trust that it's God, right? And I've kind of conceded at the beginning. How do we get to Jesus? How do we get to Yahweh? How do we get to that God? And then also, I want you mentioned the triune thing, which I was trying to remember, rack my brain. I was like, you said something I wanted to touch on. I want to touch on because this debate is about whether or not the Christian God exists.
Yes.
And I did in my opening statement, admittedly, I said we could throw that out. I don't even need that. But if you do get into the triune aspect of it, like that is just legitimately a violation of the law of identity. I can give you a structured syllogism right now with the following conclusion that that is reasonable, more reasonable than saying that he doesn't violate the law of identity, even from like a non-modalist perspective.
Could you do that?
Yeah, I can do it right now. Just
Go for it.
Pop it in my head. So what was the first part that I went to so we can go back to that?
Actually, shoot. Well, okay, let me answer. Sorry, hold that thought real quick. Let me try to answer your
Syllogism is
question
in my
first.
head. We'll go there. I just want to make sure we don't forget the other huge chunk we just talked about.
Syllogism. Let me answer your question. So the reason why I'm starting from that premise, and this is actually an argument that I forgot to give, so this is my bad. This is why I also pointed to IP. So IP, he actually is working on a 6th episode right now on the irreducible mind. I would encourage people to watch that. That was an argument that I forgot to give. I forgot to also show that we have a lot of scientific evidence that once again supports indirectly the notion that consciousness itself is not something that is necessarily physical, and that it is something that is correlated with the brain, but not.
Well, we'd have to go there because I'm a reductive physicalist. So I'm going to argue that it's entirely physical and that consciousness isn't necessarily like a flat thing, right? It's like a layer of different type of things, right? Like a layer of particle interactions, right? This isn't just like it's way more saying consciousness doesn't do it justice on terms of what we're actually talking about, I feel like, which is why I feel like we have the problem with idealism and dualism, because people take that to the other level. They take that to the other side.
Right. This is something that I should also point to as well. So something that I've noticed, this is actually something that Michael also points out too, is that you and I are speaking different languages, and what we will actually do, and without even realizing it, is that we will actually very subtly, but maybe even unintentionally, switch our methodologies, in a sense, when it's convenient for the argument. I'm not even just accusing you of this. I'm accusing myself. So here's what I mean by that. Whenever you're talking about evolution, Darwinistic evolution, yes.
I'm a computational biologist. We just like a lot of people take that, or biology major. I'm not a biologist yet, but the Darwinian thing is almost like derogatory at this point. It's like when people say that, it's like it seems like they're not up to speed with like
it's
more advancements of what we're talking about. Right. When you say that, I know what you mean, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, because there's like now 5 different variations of that argument. So now you actually kind of need to be specific.
Some people don't have problems with it. I've talked, like, some of my professors are like, yeah, no, that's fine. Some of my professors are like, don't say that because it just makes you sound ignorant. You know, it's kind of split in that way. But
but the point is that, right, this is something that Michael pointed out in a video that he did with another guy. But he said, essentially, yes, you have evidence. I get that. You have scientific and physical evidence, which is what you prefer, presumably. And when it comes to evolution, I would disagree with you. I know that I'm kicking the hornet's nest in saying this, but I would disagree with you that you have proof, by the definition of proof, that our evolution is true from the perspective of, I believe in evolution from the perspective of animals changing over the course, but I don't believe that they have changed kinds. Now, that's not the topic of the debate, but I'm
sure. I'm just gonna say Google polyploidy speciation. But anyway, go on. But
I will say, in the same sense that you are inferring the conclusion that that's why I have to specify Darwinian evolution is true, is you're making the inference to the best explanation, and that's what I'm doing. So, but the thing is that when I'm talking about God, whereas I'm working from the top down when I'm shifting over to evolution to try and find reasons for why it's wrong. I feel like in the same sense, the atheist is also, when we start talking about, when we're trying to build our case up to God so we can kind of let you see what we kind of see, then now all of a sudden the evidence doesn't add up the same way whenever we build that case up. And then we have to start nitpicking all of these little things, just kind of like how Christians, when they go into evolution, they have to start nitpicking all these things to try and fight the conclusion that this is not true.
Well, it's really hard for me to because I don't want to get into evolution because that is something that's like a hot button for me, right?
I know. I was just giving you, it's just to point
I know. But I have to ask you in relation to this. Do you think it's more likely that we respond here like a video game?
Well, that's why I'm trying to bring in the mind. That's why I'm trying to help. That's why I'm trying to get.
Yes, but tell me, because evolution is a fact. Like, regardless if you want to accept it, like, this debate is over. It's done with. Like, the only people that debate this are people on the internet on YouTube. This is not an issue anymore. I'm not trying to say that to be mean to you. I'm just
I know
the fact, right? This is evolution is the fact. This is the fact,
Mike. And here's the thing. I can even accept, and I can give you the benefit of the doubt, that there is no other model of evolution that is true. However, if we go back to Genesis, nothing contradicts what the Bible says, because because it's about to get into consciousness. Because if we're talking about the first human beings, spawned in like a video game, how the Bible actually kind of talks about it. But
it was from dirt. It was basically like a video game.
Like,
even for the sake of the argument, you don't have the genetic diversity for you to even proliferate, right? Like, you don't even have to go. This is what I said in my opening statement. You don't even have to go that far out of looking at near extinct species to see how problematic that this theory is, right? Like, if we all died and it was David and Miss David, right? Some random lady, and you guys had to do this all over again, it wouldn't work. Probably not going to work. I'm sorry. And we just, this is just the way, this is just how we understand this is why when you look at things like the heterozygous advantage and things, or you look at certain things like sickle cell anemia, right? And you look at these things that we can see, like where someone might have this benefit from malaria or something, where they have this offset thing. This is why we can't create like this genetic monster of a human, right? There has to be this diversity. We require it. And so this is an issue for the creation story, just even for the sake of the argument. But regardless of that, like we can show you populations. Like there's something called the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, right? We can see the speed of evolution in a population through this equation. We can literally observe it directly. But that is less than being spawned from dirt or whatever. Like, that's what I don't get. Like, how is that? Because if you're going from the best, you're going abductive, the best argument. No, you're using abduction. I'm using induction and actual evidence and things like that. I'm not using abductive reasoning, because abductive reasoning only can get you a hypothesis at best.
Did I say abductive or inductive?
You said reasoning to like the best inference.
Okay. I was trying to make sure that I didn't misspeak. So this is why I'm starting off of this premise. So I will, with science, science is kind of changing every day. We don't have, we're always coming up with new technology that helps us better understand things. So I'm fine with conceding that I don't know all of the details, right? I don't know, precisely. Like some people with the Old Testament say that, a day for God could have been easily, given that time is kind of relative to God, you could say that a day for God when he was creating things could have been thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions or billions of years. So there's that. What I do know, I don't know the details, but I've heard the arguments, and I know that there are some people out there who have actually created models using scientific data, and nothing does contradict when you take that. I don't know the information, but when you take that data into consideration and theologians or whoever is using those arguments use the scientific data, there is nothing that flat out contradicts the Old Testament. Now it might spin the Old Testament on its head for some, but it doesn't.
No, it does. Like literally, my field is computational biology. If we did this if I literally did this in some computational way, right? Like we would be able to demonstrably show that this doesn't work. So I don't know what you mean when you say that if we were to take this in that realm, that it would show this, because it doesn't at all. We take this into the realm and it shows very one specific thing and not the other. But I mean, we might go back in circles on that, and I don't know how much time we have. So do you want to get into the Trinitarian thing, or do we want to?
Yeah, we can get into that. Well, let me say this though. Okay, you believe, Mike, right now, and I'm just going to point something out here. Okay, I'm fine with conceding that I don't know. I'm going to just let science do its thing. I believe I know what I know. I don't feel like I have to know every little detail. But here's the thing. Okay, you believe that you have the better evidence, and you're saying, hey, this is the evidence that I have, and this is the conclusion that I come to. Aren't you kind of asking me on some level to either look into this for myself, or aren't you kind of asking me in a sense to trust that what you are saying is true?
No, not at all. Not at all. I actually don't want you to take, this is the difference between us. I don't want you to take what I'm saying is true, because I'm only spewing out claims, right? But what I'm saying is independently verifiable, right? You can falsify the shit that comes out my mouth right now, dude. That's the difference of what I'm saying. Like, here's the thing. That's a great point that you make. Don't trust what I'm saying. Look into it, because that's how confident I am that this hypothesis fails and that Yahweh doesn't exist.
Okay. So you are saying I believe that God does not exist. Look into the evidence for yourself and make your own conclusion.
I'm saying look into the creation stories, and if you don't claim that they're metaphors, which it sounds like you're not doing, and I tip my beanie off to you. I tip that off to you because you stick to your guns, and you're like, hey, I'm not saying that this is metaphor. I mean, some things might. That was a big sticking point in my opening statement. I'm like, I hope David doesn't go into this metaphor thing because we won't get anywhere. If you can use metaphors at your convenience, well, that just seems like a really crappy method for the God. But also, if it's a dire message, like I'm not going to warn somebody across the street whose house is on fire that they don't know about it, call them up and start reciting like a poem or singing, like rapping Tupac to them, right? Like it wouldn't get the message across them. They'd just be like, well, it was a metaphor, and then they die, right? Then I burn in hell because I thought it was a metaphor. And that isn't my fault. That's the fault of the person that decided, let me use this method that rivals every religion that's false. Let me use a method that allows for the translations to be from dead languages or have to be subject to forgeries or people that don't know things or in the hands of people that didn't even know that brushing your teeth is a valuable thing to consider, right? Like this thing to me, it just seems so obvious, but I guess that's just my position.
No, I understand. Let me respond to that because you're making a good point, and this is why I said that the staple I think of Christianity is that the only thing that's worth knowing in the Christian religion is where you stand with God. That's really it. Like, here's the thing, right? Like, that's why I pointed. Like, you can have like Ra or Cyrus, whoever, you know. I think that the best thing about Christianity is that God can find you, so to speak, at any time. And here's the thing, right? Whereas other gods, like I said, they say you have to do X, Y, or Z to earn my favor. God has said, you already know that you've broken the law, and I'm offering you a way out. Like, you can share the gospel with someone in less than 2 minutes. If someone is literally dying and they only have minutes to live, they don't have to go to college and study for 10 years and look at all of the evidence that led up to the conclusion that God exists to say, okay, I'm finally convinced now that God exists because I took 10 years to look at all of the, like, let's say that God was proven tomorrow. Well, now everyone who's born tomorrow, if they want to know if God exists, and they have to look at all of the extensive evidence that it exists. Well, first of all, they're not even guaranteed that they're going to live that long before they can then make up their mind. That's why I said the beauty. That's what the beauty is. The deeper learning. Here's what I think. Okay, this is my personal belief. I believe that the reason why evidence is seeming like changing, or that we're not necessarily coming to a conclusion, is in part because God is an infinite being. There's always going to be new things that you can learn. But also, I also acknowledge the part that we are also human beings, and that the way that we go about looking for things is also going to be flawed. But the thing is that I think that God wants to keep the conversation going because everyone is going to require different levels of evidence. Everyone at some point is going to have their own personal experience of how they came to Christ. I wouldn't say that invalidates it. And that's,
I mean, but do you think that everyone's personal experience that they astral projected and then talked about it on spiritual TikTok validates their claim that it's actually true? You know what I'm saying, though? Like, because that's the thing. Those personal experiences don't mean anything because, David, I can rival that you had an experience with Jesus the same way that my mom or anyone else might have, right? Or anybody that might have believed in this, right? Like, that's fine. They had a personal experience. I cannot take that away from them. But sure, it's funny to me that we have all these contradicting personal experiences that, you know, the same way we have all these contradictory detailing of how we're going to use the methodology that's like, hey, we'll use the same writing and, you know, books and put them together with primitive men. It's like when you add all that up together, it's like, well, if you are going to go abductive here, like, I mean, I don't know why you're going to say on a ratio from 1 to infinity of the amount of things we could just create out of our head, astral projection or manifestation or Yahweh or Krishna or whatever it could be. It could be Yahweh with a hat. It could be Yahweh dancing, right? It could be whatever we change the variation to. It's rivaled by that. And the same way that we don't accept some proposition you've never heard or you think it doesn't exist or likely doesn't, I just don't see, like, we need something that separates that, right? T-Jump puts it great. He says, how do we differentiate between imagination and reality, right? That's a very good epistemic starting point. So, like, I don't know about looking at the cosmos or looking at this and then retrofitting it works. I think that's starting from a position and saying this is substantiated works because like anything else, it seems to work with everything else I believe in, right? I don't have issues with even something like the RNA world hypothesis, right? Like we can actually show like how clay is a catalyst to help these ribonucleotides form into the structure, right? Like we can actually look at these things, or we can get evidence to substantiate it in some way. It might not be like, hey, this is true, but we're onto something. I don't know what we have for Yahweh. I don't see it. I just see a book that says a thing. That's what I see.
Well, I wasn't even necessarily pointing to the. I gave an example, right? So like I said, Hebrew. There's other verses too. So this is what I was trying to say. Let me finish this point. I saw we have a minute left. So the reason why I brought up consciousness is because
I didn't even see that.
That's okay. The evidence does seem to suggest that consciousness is not physical, and if that's true, okay, I know that I'm going to be doing more inductive reasoning. But if that's true, which the evidence supports, because as far as I understand, all of the ways that we have previously known consciousness to be associated with the brain, it seems to refuse to add up to consciousness. The only thing that we seem to be left with is that consciousness is something that is merely correlated to the brain. And I know that you said, that, well, the way I kind of see it is, it's like, if I take a hammer to your brain and crack your head open, you're dead. And that makes logical sense. I get what you're saying. But if consciousness is more like Wi-Fi, well, now if you have a phone and you break the phone, that doesn't mean that the signal's not coming. It just means that the contraption that is used to receive that signal is not able to communicate anymore. And when you look at the near-death experiences of people having, floating around the hospitals that they were pronounced dead at, and coming back to consciousness and reporting things that were later confirmed to be true, like a red object on top of the hospital that turned out to be a red shoe. Consciousness seems to be a non-physical thing. So that's what I was trying to say.
Let's have a debate about that.
What? About consciousness?
You're either a dualist or an idealist. I'm a reductive physicalist. I mean, like a very minority, like my non-reductive physicalist, like scold me, right? I'm in a very minority position here, but I would love to debate that. But anyway,
I'll have to research. I'll have to look into that first before we do that. So the universe then functioning like consciousness, like thought. Then that's what I'm trying to at least start from. I'm trying to get you to see, hey, we can talk about the Trinity, right? But if the universe seems to essentially operate like either a computer or a mind or some combination of the two, well, I know that this seems very simple, but you say we spawned in here like a video game and that seems ridiculous. Well, think about this for a second. Just hear me out on this. If you think in your mind right now, your mind is essentially a black nothingness. You can literally spawn things into your mind. You can even hear words in your mind. You can create things in your mind that don't even necessarily exist in reality. But you say that we can't. That us spawning in here like a video game is an absurd notion. But if the universe represents a mind, why couldn't I think therefore I am? God calls himself the great I am. If he's a mind and he's conscious and he's not physical, why couldn't he do the same?
The Atheist Round Table. Welcome to the soft sounds of the motherfucking Atheist Round Table, featuring Oz, David Gonzalez, and JMike. I'm Pasta Mike, and we want to welcome the ever so funky Shannon Q. Famous for being funky, and Oz is muted, which is fine. It's fine by me. I don't mind. I didn't do it though. It wasn't my doing. What's up, Ozzy?
What's up, Pasta?
Hey, look, are you a reductive physicalist? Are you one of those guys? Because I can't figure out which one I am. I've been peeling through all the many ones, and I'm like, you know what? I don't know what the fuck I am. I'm just one of those guys that doesn't believe dogma.
I'm at this place where there's too many onions to peel to get to a god. So
I'm a satirist. Realist. I'm
I'm
the realist, pimp. What up, dog?
I'm a mythicist, the CEO.
The CEO of mythicist.
Yep.
Now, if you were to bump into David Gonzalez in a dark alley, what would you? And you just got a sniff of him as you walk by. What would you say he was?
I'd say he wants to be an atheist, but he doesn't want to turn his back on his belief.
Really? You're that confident? Do you have Cartesian truth in this?
Yeah, Yeah, I just the energy, the vibes.
Cartesian certainty. Hey, look, I've enjoyed this debate. It's been a nice back and forth. No yelling, no shouting, and I feel like JMike is well structured with what he's brought to the table. It's polished. David, as you mentioned, very consistent, comes on the show on a regular basis. Never gets upset, never shows emotions. I think I've only ever seen David upset one time, and it was when I told him that, he wasn't a very good singer. He was singing backstage one time, and he got ever so offended by that. But other than that, very even keeled.
Well, and there was that one time. I think it was the second time we talked to him on the channel, and I don't know if it was his auxiliary plug-in or whatever, but it sounded like a train kept going through his closet he was in.
Yes, that's right. He had a train. He had a train going by. It was the Logic train, and he wasn't on it. He wasn't on that train.
But he's upped his gear, and he's looking good, sounding good.
Sounding great. Hey, but what we got going on in this last little part? Because are we doing Q&A? Are we going to ask some of these questions? Some good questions in the chat.
Yep. So it wasn't say they have 5-minute closes a piece, so they can close their argument out, and then we'll open up to Q&A. Possibly presenting the Q's and the A's. But yeah, but they got 5 minutes a piece. So everybody start putting your questions in the chat now as they do that. And then we'll get to it. You ready, Pasta?
Yeah, Murder Shed Steven text and said that he can't come on tonight. He's chopping something up. I could hear some kind of because when I called him back, I could hear some kind of machinery going. But and I think he lives up there near Fargo. But needless to say, J. Michael and David G. Let's get them back in here.
He's damn, that was impressive.
Thanks.
You've clearly been yelled at by your mom before.
Oh, that's
Pass
good.
the mic with the jokes or with the sound check.
I had to use the restroom real fast, so.
So, did he say we're doing a Q&A? Is that what he said?
I think are we doing closings first? Is that what you said?
You're doing closings.
Okay, cool.
David, you'll close first.
All right. Okay, so 5 minutes. All right, 9:51. Okay, so I just want to say, I appreciate it, Mike. The thing, I believe the notion that God gives everyone the what's the word? He gives you the dignity of making up your own mind. I do think that everyone can know enough about God and who he claims to be, which is not necessarily any particular thing outside of the person of Jesus. He just claims in the Bible to be a conscious mind, which I hope that I have at least demonstrated that we seem to see that with the evidence that we currently have, and that he's accessible to anyone who wants to know. I think that our morality comes from him. I think that the voice that we all have in our heads that tells us when we do something wrong comes from him. And I believe that, God is trying to reconcile us to him. Assuming the account of Genesis is true, there were two human beings in the world that chose to disobey God. And then through them, we have also decided to essentially run away and turn away from God. I think that not only God exists, but that the Christian God is the best God. He is, like I said, he's accessible to anyone. He doesn't require you to go through strenuous mental exercise. Not that they're bad. I'm not thinking that, but he's accessible to anyone who wants to be forgiven, who wants to know who he is. And I appreciate you, Mike. Here's the thing that I want people to take away. I know that there is a confusion between faith and evidence. Okay. The Bible is riddled. Okay. You can point me to any verse. I'm pretty sure I know all of them.
Hebrews 11:1.
Which one? What does that one say?
The faith is the evidence unseen.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So yes, faith is the assurance, but it says faith is the assurance of things hoped for, that is the future that pertains to sin. And if you experience forgiveness, you believe that there is a God who is going to hold you morally accountable. You don't see the judgment day. You don't see after death. That's what that's talking about. Is the assurance of things hoped for, meaning that Jesus is going to stand in your place on the day of judgment and say, I took the punishment for your sin. The evidence, or as some translations actually say, the conviction of things not seen, right? And that's why, I think forgiveness, love, a lot of emotions, we don't see these things, we feel them. When we do something wrong, we feel guilt. Well, guilt is not necessarily a thing. It's a result from doing something that I would argue with God violates your conscience. That God is an immaterial being. And so that's what that verse is referring to. And in other verses, you will see in a lot of verses, a lot of Bible verses, God seems to be very clear, that he doesn't want you to at least believe without a reason. And so, Mike, I hope that you find God, or that he finds you, whichever way he decides to do that. For you, it might just be more evidence, just like Thomas. And I think that's perfectly fine. Just like you said, I don't think, I believe you in some sense that, I don't want you to take the fake it till you make it, just believe in something with no reason. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think that when you look, I would encourage everyone to check out Michael's page. He has a lot of stuff with Genesis, with the Bible, with scientific philosophy. I think the best way that you can see God right now with the scientific evidence that we have is to look at, I can try and find this argument. We see that the cosmos operates like, not exactly, but like some kind of computer reality or a mind. We see that consciousness does not seem to be necessarily reducible to the brain, but is correlated with the brain. It seems to be an intangible thing. Well, if God is a mind, we are also minds. We're created in the image of God. That logically follows. And then, of course, if we exist in either a computer or the mind of God, everything else that I would say that is relevant to the gospel follows. Jesus was who he claimed he was, the Son of God. He showed that he had control over his computer / mind by performing miracles, by addressing and confronting demons or bad ideas, whatever you want to call them. He showed that he had power over disease, which is what a result of sin was. And he showed that he is the author of life and death itself by proving that he was raised from the dead. Only God can do that. And so for me, that's why I think God does exist. I think Mike brings up a lot of good things that should be looked into. I don't necessarily think that disproves God. And like I said, I'm not going to say that I know everything about the Bible or that everything that we currently have is the most accurate representation, but it is the foundation, and God has preserved his word throughout time. So thank you. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Austin and other Mike, Pasta Mike, for having me. And it's been good.
If I believe in God, then give me I think it's a 5150 head in the back and an orange cab. Give me that if I come to Christ. That's your deal for me. Yeah. So I guess for my closing statement, I mean, I would just say, go back and watch what I said. And that's my closing statement. But no, I would say, I'm someone, sorry for knocking my camera. I'm not someone that thinks that I don't lack the belief in the Christian God. I think this God does not exist. I wish that more atheists would actually just be comfortable looking at this and just being able to say this, because I think it's probably more likely Zeus existed than Yahweh did because of the amount of claims. But I guess I would leave off with, let's presume that a kid grew up his entire life never seeing or hearing his parents. And he's been put in a situation where he gets all his information from his parents via a sticky note around the house. All right. And the sticky note tells him what to do, what not to do, the fundamental nature of his existence, who will be locked up in the basement for eternity for not following the rules, who will get to party in the attic for eternity for following the rules. How do we validate the reliability of these notes outside the anecdotal testimony itself? Are we going to say that the sticky notes are evidence of the claim? Are we going to say that if one of the sticky notes said 500 people witnessed that there was the parents putting them around the house, is that going to validate the claim? To sum up my position, I think that the final nail of the unreliability is the texts that are placed and the method that is imposed by itself. And it's hammered in by the overwhelming inconsistencies from the poor translations of Alma in Isaiah 7:14, dealing with a virgin birth, to the genealogies of Matthew and Luke, the message defeats itself on its own. But thank you.
Since we have a few
and
minutes
David,
left,
and David, I wanted to say, David, I always love having a chat with you. So thank you for having a conversation, bud.
Same here, man. I appreciate that. Hey, can I? Do you want me to quickly address the Trinity real quick since you brought that up? I think I can explain it really very quickly.
Well, hold on. Let me just give you my premises, and we can maybe precursor this into that. Right? Premise one. There's only one. Damn it! I thought I could sneak it in real quick.
We're gonna stay strict on the time because the Trinity. Now you're getting a whole bag of shit.
We
So
can
you
have
three.
a debate about that.
Okay, you're wasting time talking. You have 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Go.
On my so in my closing statement. Okay, so my closing statement, I take the 3 minutes and 45 seconds that I have, and I give time to David to come in the conversation. My first premise is there is one true God. Do you accept that premise? That's the first premise. Yes. Premise 2, Jesus is God. Do you accept that premise?
Yes.
Premise 3, Jesus is the Holy Spirit. Do you accept, or God is the Holy Spirit, whichever, we can interchange those. Do you accept? No. You don't accept that. You don't accept that Jesus is the Holy Spirit?
No.
Okay, tell me the difference.
Okay.
First off, I just want to point out that premise 2 has already violated the law of identity because you said Jesus is God, right? If they're two different people and there's one God, then that premise does not make sense if they're two, if Jesus and God are existing at two different times.
Yes.
So let me rephrase premise 3. Premise 3 is that they exist separate of each other.
Okay, I don't know that they exist separate of each other, but I will say that they are not the same, what we call in Christianity, the same person.
Yes, so it would if it's not the same person but the same identity, and they have two different identities of one identity.
Yes.
Would that not okay? So then that violates identity and non-contradiction annex.
Let me quickly. This is a foundation. This is something that I've found a way to respond to. And I'm not going to say that it's exact, but it is going to illustrate how the law of identity is not being violated, even though it may not be the perfect. Okay, I'm going to say the same thing back to you. I'm going to repeat your premise as you understand how you're representing God. Okay, if we accept that the definition of the word family means
you're gonna go into your last name Gonzalez, right? We've had this conversation.
Well, family. You're going to use the term family.
Yeah, we had this conversation. You use this Gonzalez is not the same Gonzalez, right? Like but it's all one Gonzalez. No. Those are three different identities, and Gonzalez is an abstraction. It's not a real thing. It's not a thing. There's no Gonzalez. Gonzalez represents you. You guys just share this like a Platonist is going to say this universal between you, like Gonzalez exists.
Well, Gonzalez was the.
I'm anomalous, so I'm going to reject that and say that the Gonzalez is just an abstraction that doesn't actually exist.
Gonzalez was my old example. I've actually changed it real quick. I only have a few minutes, or a couple minutes. Let me explain this to you. So as I understand it, as best as I understand it. So God can be synonymous in this analogy with the title of family. Right. The definition of family is a husband, wife, and at least one child. Right. If two people are married,
the argument stands though, because the family is still an abstraction. It's not a thing. Those people are separate identities. They're not one thing. That's the difference between family, Jesus and God, is that they're one thing that's also not one thing. Violates the law of identity. Therefore, it's impossible that God does not exist.
What if God to family is mother, father, child? Father, Son, and Spirit. You can't have family. Okay, it says time. I'm gonna have to maybe someone asked the question in the comments.
And to Chris Yolery, these are man-made laws. Yes, they're descriptive, but you cannot deny your existence, and existence and non-existence can't be simultaneously. So therefore, yes, they are absolute in that sense.
Oh, pasta man.
Oh shit, man!
Shit!
It's that time, bro. It's that time, son.
It's that time before we go to Q&A. We have to call a winner. So right now, out of the last 5 debates, this will be the 6th. The theists winning 3-2. But we have to call a winner. You and I.
Oh, okay. It's going to be like that. Now, here on the Tardy Tarts, we're not afraid to divvy out titles to people that we don't share belief with, and that's not an issue for me either. I don't mind acknowledging if a person has a better argument and whatnot. But I got to admit that I do find it difficult for anybody to have a better argument than JMike. I talk to JMike privately a lot of the time, and I've known him now for over a year. And we chat, and I think his philosophy on the existence of God or gods is outstanding. And although I'm not a big fan of this style of debate, I think the discussions that JMike has on the topic is second to none. So I do like JMike's approach here. So I would lean more toward JMike in the least biased way, because I also appreciate David's arguments as well. I do, do appreciate where David's coming from too.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing. It's if you are judging a debate by who presents their argument or their case the best, that's how you judge it. Whether you agree or disagree with the opposing argument, that's the scale it should be on. And if you can't judge it by that, you probably shouldn't be judging debates. But in this one, yes, JMike has even from the time that I first started listening to him, to hear him from where he was to today has come light years, and he fills all the gaps. As soon as you think he's going to morality, it's like, oh, nope, he went to morality, but then he filled on the holes, and now he's going back to existence. So it really is an impeccable approach. I think it's one of those where it's hard to find a hole in his argument.
You bring up a good point as well. Like, to be fair, if this had taken place maybe 8 months ago, I wasn't a big fan of JMike's approach to debate. I may have, had a difference of opinion, but regardless of style and technique, some of the thought processes that JMike has when it comes to the explanations and when now that he's got some more biblical background and when he goes into the Bible, in my opinion, he's a very well structured debater, and he's going to be hard to beat by anybody, any theist. Yeah. So bring it, folks.
Anybody wants to, because when we first started, all of us chopping it up, JMike didn't have a lot of the Bible
was the DMX.
knowledge.
We can let's call it out how it is. He was the DMX. Come on, Kate.
Yeah, well, and there wasn't a ton of the Bible knowledge, but now he's coupled, the philosophy and understanding of science with understanding Scripture, knowing Scripture. That's a deadly three piece in a biscuit right there.
And in David's defense here, I like his presentation. I like his demeanor.
Absolutely.
And the way he approaches the arguments. I just don't think that he brought the sauce today to substantiate some of the powerful knowledge that JMike had there.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, his consistency and his unwavering, like he's relentless. That you have to respect that, whether it's a competition or a debate or whatever. When somebody just gets at it and they don't quit, no matter what the opposition is, you have to tip your hat and respect that.
Is it fair to say that JMike might actually be Jesus and he's trying to trick everybody? He's like doing some kind of prank.
At this point, I feel like when we met him, he's went from the 10-year-old Jesus. Now we're up to probably about mid-20s Jesus right before he dies.
Wait a minute. There's a period of Jesus' life where he wasn't written about. I think it's 12 to 22 or somewhere. So
that's why I said mid-20s. Yep.
Yeah. Is that what is it? Yeah. Anyway, let's get to some Q&A. Let's get Q&A going. And I'm gonna grill some of these guys.
Yeah. So let's do the Q&A. We'll get the boys back on.
Hell yeah. All right now. Oh shit! Got the big old.
It's God.
I think it looks better. You know what? Your face is better than the God face. And,
but you're asking the question.
Yeah, but I'll ask the questions. You can show the beauty. So I've held the. I don't know if people are privy to how StreamYard works, but I've had to stop the comments up here because I didn't want these things to get away from me. Let's go with this first, because the Blazing Wizard Pope dropped some of these dollar bills in here. If the Christian
All right.
God is the best God, which other gods are there we can choose between?
It sounds like a question for Mike, I think.
It's
No, I'm
open.
kidding.
I mean, you guys
No,
can
I'm
both,
just kidding.
both
Yeah,
go for this.
that sounds like it's for me. That was.
I was like, wait, what?
I was pulling your leg there.
You're good.
So this is where I believe that if what I call God, if that's true, everything else naturally follows. And I would say that for this question, the answer would simply be found in Scripture itself, because the Bible does give. That's why I said that the Bible is a book that is mostly for believers. And this isn't like a culty thing. It's more of like I said, like the Bible says, all Scripture is God breathed, is useful for teaching, correcting, rebuking, and training in righteousness. It doesn't claim to be a science book. It doesn't claim. So the interesting thing with Christianity, with this question, is that the Bible, as far as I know, is one of the only religions that actually talks about false teachings, people who are preaching what is called a false gospel, things that would otherwise mislead people away from the truth. And when it comes to, demon, I'm perfectly fine with saying, I can accept that every single God that has been reported to exists. And I can still argue why God is a better God. Because Zeus is only in charge. Zeus and Thor are only in charge of thunder if they exist. But guess what? The universe still had to exist before they did. And so as far as I can tell, even if I grant you that every other God exists, that the one whose computer simulation or mind we exist in, that is the one true God. Every other being that would be called a God, which I would say is honestly just a demon that is trying to distract people from the truth, well, they are submissive to the name of Jesus. They are submissive to God. And so you can choose them if you want, but that's what makes, since you put it in quotations, he is the best God, because he's the head honcho. It
sounds like God fucked up by making demons. Like, why did he do that?
Well, okay, demon is a terminology, but technically they are angels. In fact, Satan is actually called the most beautiful angel. And even ironically, when it comes to false teachers or false teachings, one of the ways that the Bible talks about those things is that watch out for wolves in sheep's clothing, because Satan cloaks himself as an angel of light, basically coming with the things that people want to hear, taking from truth, like the not metaphorical serpent, but that's a mistranslation of what it actually would have been. Just like the serpent did in the garden, it deceived, it stole from truth and it twisted it. So yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Snakes. Hey, no, this is a really cool philosophical question. I got to get this one up for my man JMike. This is from Mike Burgandy.
That's my boy. That's my boy, Mike Burgandy.
So take some time on this one, Mike.
It's a very deep question.
Well, so I basically just decided not to give a shit about my appearance, and so that's like the proverbial like guy with the leather jacket flipping the coin. That's kind of like what I'm channeling there in some ways.
Like homeless sheep.
Yeah, homeless. Yeah, exactly. Like Rasputin mixed with Jesus or something like that. But no, I take my vitamins and don't say my prayers. I don't know.
Oz in the DJ booth right there. What's up, Oz? I see you, player.
No, real talk. I think I hear my smoke detectors.
Oh, shoot.
All right.
I thought I heard something too. Actually, I was like, "Is there like a loud beep or what was that?"
Hey, look, if Oz doesn't come back, David, do me a favor. Go ahead and stop praying for him, because just in case the police don't get there or the fire department. Let's see. All right, David. Question for David. Could you tell us how we can be saved by God and why we need it? That's from Mr. Chris Ellery.
Such a Chris Ellery question.
It is such an Ellery question, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. This is the method by which I would say anyone can truly know God. There might be some Christianese in here, but so I can try and explain it in more layman's terms for people who may not understand. I even say that Christians should start trying to find ways to still convey the same message without using the Christianese, because that can just confuse people. But okay, being saved by God kind of goes back to what I said before. God existing means that him being the one true God, he is a personal being, which means that he values morality. Now, morality, I know this is a whole different conversation, but morality hinges on God's nature, which we say God is good. Now, I know that Mike would have a lot of he's probably got a dozen things popping in his head right now for why he would challenge this, but essentially God being good means that he's the standard of good. He is the standard of, of what we could say is a moral law. And just like in Romans 1, it says, that the things of God are made plain clearly to those, his divine nature, his eternal power. We literally can see small examples of the gospel message just every day, right? We see someone do a bad thing, such as rape or murder, and we say that person deserves a punishment because of that. That's not okay. And in the eyes of God, because of how good he is, us violating his standard that he's given us means that we also deserve punishment for the sin that we've committed against him. But because God cares about us, he still has to be good and just, because that's part of being good. He also doesn't want us. The Bible says that he desires that none should perish, but that all come to salvation. He sent his son as an eternal atonement, since since he himself is eternal, and he lived the perfect life on our behalf and died the death that we deserve. And that if that's what the faith in Christianity is that you acknowledge and accept that you're not doing anything to save yourself. You're simply recognizing that you have broken a law and acknowledging that you have you are a criminal in God's eyes, so to speak, but that God has done something in your place. He's paid a price that you couldn't pay. And that if you put your faith in Jesus and Jesus alone, then you will be saved from your sin. And the Garden of Eden that was supposed to be in the Bible before Adam and Eve decided to sin against God, when we die, we will be resurrected and we will be restored and given a new conscience and live with God forever in what was always supposed to be. So,
all right. Hey, great. I just got word from the producers backstage that the responses are down to 1,000 words minimum now going forward, David. So just to be mindful, because let's see now to play it fair, we do have a two-parter here. Another one from Chris, JMike. JMike.
Oh, hey.
Let's keep these answers under 8 minutes, okay?
Sure, easy. If there's no God, what do you find your hope in, and why? I find hope in the fact that I'm experiencing there's something seemingly going on here. I find myself in an area of people that seem to care about me. I seem to care about them. Doesn't matter at what level I reduce this down to. Like some people like to say, love is just chemicals, or it's just this. Why does that matter? Doesn't matter how we break it down at. The fact that it's actually happening is enough for me. It could be a simulation, wouldn't matter to me. I don't claim to know the ontology of my experience, but I do know that there's enough of the seeming that's going on for me to find my hope in things that I can do now. And one of those things that I love doing that I've realized through meditation was just that there's not a possible way I can learn everything in the world. It's just not, there's just too much in the world for me to know everything, because I'm going to die and I have a finite time. And that was enough to kind of kick me in the ass and go, I want to learn about the world that's around me. And so science and things like that helped me. I went from being a 1.5 GPA student, dropout, college, computer programming dropout, to going back and getting my GPA to a 3.6 and then going now for computational biology. Not to brag or boast, but to say that I find immense value in the things that I do or the family that I have. It doesn't matter if there's ultimately any meaning. I would say if it's a book that never ends, that would actually make it worse. I would hope there's a finite thing so it can give rise to value and meaning, since I know it won't last forever.
All right. So, hey, yeah. Let's see. Let's take a look. I feel
like that was the only question for me.
No, there's a few. There's a few in here. Let's see.
So sorry if I did the David with part 5 and 7. Sorry.
No. David just put in the private chat. You ain't got nothing on my long answers.
We give crap to David for his part videos, but honestly, I appreciate that he's like, no, I'm gonna get all the points out. Where I'm sitting there going, how the fuck do I get all of this in 59 seconds, right? And he's just like, fuck it. That doesn't matter. I'm getting it all in. It'll be 20 fucking 7 parts. You're gonna watch it, Atheist Jesus.
Yeah. JMike, how long we've known David for at least a year? At least a year.
David was the first Atheist Roundtable episode that
was.
never actually made it to air.
No, the first one did. So,
that was the Steamboat one.
That was the prototype.
So yeah, the first episode did. The first episode did. The second time he came on, it didn't make it to air because it got a little bit heated.
Maybe that was it.
But it wasn't JMike's fault. Let's just say Oz's house is on fire for a reason. But but
I really hope his house isn't on fire.
No, I could see him backstage in the
Okay.
He's right here. Look at his little face. There's his little face. Look at his little face right there. But yeah, there you go.
Everything good? Well, I'm guessing it's good because you're back and your beard's not on fire.
But we used to laugh in a polite way at David's like 88-part series that he used to do. JMike would be like, "Oh gosh, here we go," because you'd make one comment that'd be like, "That's not true, bro," and then like, "Oh yeah." 88-part series. Great stuff.
Well, it's funny because I remember like seeing him tag me in a video when we had a different username, and I remember seeing him being like, this motherfucker, this little fucking guy. And then now me and him are cool, and like it's not even an issue at any point. But I remember just being like, this guy's calling me out, right? But it was all in good fun. So
it was, yeah.
So Thomas Bobby G asked,
that's a good question.
What are the 3 transformations of one triangle?
You can make me think. Rotation, reflection, and translation.
Boom! Cha-chang.
I only know that because I had to do a programming thing with triangles, and so yeah.
Triangles coming soon. Let's see here. Let's take a look.
I realized how dumb that sounded with triangles. There's a lot more to it than that. That just sounded really stupid. Sorry.
Okay, David. Thought you were off the hook. Hey, Oz, get your timer ready for David. David's muted. David's muted. He can't hear this. He rambles on a little bit, Oz. He runs long. He runs long on the. Yeah.
Why is no one saying anything right now? I can't hear anything.
He goes from the book of Genesis right up to like the part where Jesus is really nice and kind to everybody, whatever book that is. Look, here we go, David. Okay. How can a good God punish Jesus if he's innocent? That's extremely unjust.
Yeah. So this is what I said.
Before you go, it's a question with an answer in it, which is kind of cool.
Sort of. I don't know. Well, okay. So this goes back to what I said about it is kind of a Christianese thing. It's not something that people hear about, but it's something called substitutionary atonement. The way sin is talked about in the Bible, I think it's either Romans 3:23 or Romans 6:23 that says, "For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life." The wages implies that there's a price, and it could be seen. It can be seen in the following sense, right? If there's a moral aspect, but there is also just a natural consequential aspect of it as well. If I say, "Hey, do not spend $1 million," I've given you a command that is now would be equivalent of a moral code. And if you go purchase an item that cost you $1 million on my credit card, you can't pay that back. But so you are now in debt because of something that you were told not to do that you said to do. And so when Jesus came, that's why it's called substitutionary atonement. You can't pay that debt off on your own, but Jesus can. And so when Jesus came, that was basically the principle behind substitutionary atonement and why Jesus had to die to save you, because he's the only one who could pay the price of that came with sin. But
would it make any sense, like, if my neighbor did something wrong and I and I
Go ahead
broke
and
my
finish.
child's arm, like would that be like a reasonable thing to do to justify my neighbor's sin?
Wait, can you say that again? I didn't hear the whole thing.
If my neighbor sinned and I broke my child's arm to make up for it, like how does that do anything?
Well, it's not related. That's like saying, well, I racked up debt, so I decided to mow the lawn. Well, okay, mowing the lawn doesn't really contribute necessarily to fixing your debt. Someone would have to either do the work that's necessary to acquire that amount that is owed. It's not it's not that it sounds like you're thinking about it from a position of just the actual punishment itself.
I'm just thinking of it as an unnecessary pain and suffering and punishment for something that is not needed. Like to me, it just seems like it's pulling on the heartstring and emotions of people. Like, oh, that's so that it's clearly like a movie, right? It's going to make you feel ways about stuff, right? That doesn't make it true. And to me, it's like, it also, when you look at it, doesn't like, if I created the same story and I go, oh, my neighbor drove all over my lawn and fucked up my lawn, and I broke my kid's arm to appease his sins, like you would think I'm crazy. That's
no. Wait,
what the Jesus.
If I take that analogy, it would be as though you legally could take that person to court, but instead what you did was you took on the work that was necessary, either by hiring someone else or by doing it yourself. You did what was necessary to fix the lawn that they ruined on their behalf. You actually fixed what they wronged. It's not that you did some weird thing that has absolutely nothing to do with the person driving on your lawn. It's related to the instance. And so that's where God's loving aspect comes in, because that's what the Bible says. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And so if you drove on my lawn, you obviously did something wrong, and I'm justified in punishing you or taking legal action against you for doing that. But instead, what I've decided to do is fix the lawn myself and then say, hey, what you did was wrong, and I fixed it, but you technically owed me something from that. And then, of course,
it just seems weird because, like, if I created AI and was like, it burned down my house is the example I like to use a lot. Like,
right,
that wouldn't be the AI's fault. That'd be my fault. I should have figured out, like, if I programmed it in such a way that it had a flamethrower to go do these things, right? Like free will. Well, then it's clearly my fault for instantiating that. I can't impose the wickedness on man and then have to send myself to be like, all right, guys, let me double down on the thing that I created to have to fix it all for you. Because it just doesn't, to me, it doesn't make sense. It's like,
I know.
It seems like a celestial, like Hitchens would say, a celestial North Korea. Like if this had happened in some dictatorship where the guy goes, I'll take the fall for it because you guys are incompetent, you'd be like, what?
JMike, look at this. Slip this in here real quick. Where do you draw that conclusion from? Are you inferring your own opinion?
What, the Jesus sacrifice thing being dumb? I mean,
I get broad, any conclusion. I guess Chris is probably meaning.
I would assume that one. I think it's entirely, the story makes no sense to say I create the conditions for everything and then go, you messed it up with one singular event, and now all the things that had no choice of existing. Like, David, did you, just a yes or no answer real quick, did you choose to exist?
No.
Nope, I didn't choose to exist either. I'm not complaining about it. I had no choice in this. I just happened to be here on YouTube with the debate, right? So now I'm thrown into a situation where I have to either accept this thing that someone before me that also had no choice in existing messed up because God made these conditions necessary, and now I'm subject to the failures of that. That makes no sense. And then to double down on that and go, God, to go, let me double down on what I would call like being a douchebag. No offense, but it would be like, hey, I messed this all up, but let me be the hero now and appease everybody. But it doesn't even do that because not everybody's a beast. You still have to just blindly accept that Jesus existed since we have no good evidence.
Well, not blindly, but
it's entirely blindly. Entirely blind. There's no, all you have is to use the claim, the source. I can write a book and I have claims. The person that commits a murder can write a book about how they're innocent. That doesn't prove that they're innocent.
Right. Well, that's why I said that you can find God. Everyone can find God through the only language that matters as a starting point, which is the moral language. We all know that there are things that we ought not do, whether you believe in God or not. And were you saying? I just want to correct this too. If this is what you're saying, I want to make sure you understand it. Are you saying that we are responsible for the consequences of Adam and Eve? Or are you saying that is your perspective that we are punished for the sin of Adam and Eve? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that the introduction of original sin has nothing to do with any of us that had also no choice at life, right? And there's a whole host of issues with the story, but I like to use the example of like a superintendent creating a school and then giving all the students, like giving 2 students, like Braille, right, to read, and they fail the test. And now every student that comes into this school system is subject to now like having to, live in the system of where you have to have like, you're essentially you have no real good method. You have to use Braille, something that you don't even understand, right? You have no actual good method at determining the validity of it. To me, it seems that the fault there is the superintendent that created everything in the way that he did, right? He's the one serving tennis. He could have served it a different way. We're waiting on the serve. He could have created all the conditions in a way where it didn't have to be this way. And if it had to be this way, then I guess you have to be a necessitarian at that point, and then we have a whole other host of issues.
I think, did Austin want to say something? It looks like, oh, never mind. Okay.
Question for David. What methodology does he have to distinguish between the imagined and the actual? He knows often about knowing God exists, but seems to dismiss the methodology needed to do so.
Yeah, well, I dismiss the methodology because I already know what the response is going to be initially. And if I don't think that you are ready to get to that step, because I already know that you're going to dismiss it, then I might not present it, but I should anyways. But that's why I said the only way that matters as a starting point, the methodology that I explained, maybe he wasn't tuned in for that part. I said the method is through the gospel. It is the recognition of morality, that sense of morality that we get comes from God, that we have violated his law. And that when you experience forgiveness, which is something that you can't experience unless there's someone reciprocating, you can ask a wall for forgiveness if you did something, but you already know that wall doesn't have the mental capacity to forgive you of anything. And you can't have that experience of being forgiven unless there is something on the other side of that dilemma saying that they forgive you. Now, it's not that I've heard an audible voice. It's that the same way that you feel forgiven when you say, hey, I did this thing that was wrong against you, and I'm sorry for that. And that person says, I forgive you. There's like this wave of relief essentially that comes over you that people probably know what I'm talking about if they've done this. That is something that takes place in Christianity. And I would argue that, and of course that comes through faith. That's why I don't want to initially bring that up, because if you already think that the concept of faith is dumb and that, you think that morality is already something that exists because of man or whatever, then I'm trying to get you to that point, but that's the reason why I don't flat out say it right off the bat, because that's when people usually just tune out and they don't, listen to what I'm trying to essentially get at. So
Oz, some guy named Oz just dropped some money in his own bank account. He said, did Davey G actually quote Adam Rich?
It's actually a really good...
Yes, I did. I was just pointing out that he made a good point that
not moist robots. Please don't tell me you said moist robots or whatever the hell he said.
If that helps the algorithm in any way, that's a really good idea. Fund yourself. Like, I'm going to start doing that.
I just referred to Adam Rich because he said something that I hadn't even necessarily realized, but like me coming, I guess you could say, to my faith, it wasn't just this thing, like it seemed that way at the time. Like it seemed like, oh yeah, this makes sense. This is the reason in and of itself for why I became a Christian. But then I thought about it more and I'm like, it wasn't necessarily just this thing on its own. And that's why I was piggybacking too off of what Mike said on his thing of when he was on Truth Wanted, because that's a good point that he brought up. No one has really ever come to God that I know of, even myself, based on just the Kalam cosmological, or just the argument from morality. I've never seen that myself, because that's not necessarily in and of itself how people come to know God. So,
question from Mike Brigandy for David: do you agree with God in Leviticus 20:13, where he says homosexuals should be killed?
I'd have to look that up again. I don't know Leviticus 20:13, but if it's what I think it is, God is punishing a certain group
Hey
of people.
Google, Leviticus 20:13. There you go.
Oh.
If a man lies with a male as with a woman, both of them have committed abomination, and they shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them.
Yeah.
Abomination.
So this is Old Testament law. This
come on,
is
David.
Oh, hold on,
Tasha-
my bad. Hold on,
No,
my bad.
I'm
the
going
one where
to
women can't speak.
let me explain this. Okay. So yes, we live in the Bible says this too, Mike. If you actually read it, you would know this.
Come on,
But
Mike.
the Bible talks that we are under a new covenant. We are under a period of grace. And as far as I even know, those laws only apply to the Israelites. I don't think you'll actually find one instance in which someone merely just being caught on just the act on that act itself, it was condemnable. The only times that you see that even implied is like with Sodom and Gomorrah, but there were other things also going on in Sodom and Gomorrah that was far outside just the fact that they were being homosexual. And another thing, it also was with pagan worship. So people were leading the people of Israel away from God. These instances are not always about that, and that law specifically only referred to the Israelites. In fact, I guarantee you that if you look in any verse, the laws that are in the Bible only applied to the Israelites, that the Israelites lived alongside other people.
That's not true. They actually say take in Leviticus. There's I think it's 24. They say take the heathens from the nations around you, for they are your property.
No, I'm talking about the laws that they had to follow. They didn't make people who were working for them. They didn't force them to believe in God. They didn't.
Let me just say one thing real fast.
It just took a dark turn.
I think that it's as clear as this. We don't even have to get into the verses and all this. The Bible says homosexuality is wrong. The Bible is wrong. To me, that is enough evidence to show that the Bible is fucking wrong. For the Bible to say that another man lives with another man, there isn't any more evidence that you need to say that this is written by primitive Bronze Age men that didn't with Oz. They didn't even know what the hell they were talking about.
Does natural law theory say
the Bible says homosexuality is wrong? I think that's the only piece of evidence that you need to know that the Bible is a false thing.
Does natural law theory say that homosexual attractions or behaviors are deemed unnatural? We're not even talking about morality. We're just saying
driving in cars is unnatural.
If loving Oz is wrong, I don't want to be right.
So okay,
talking on a cell phone is unnatural. Headphones are unnatural. Us being on YouTube through this is entirely unnatural, right?
Real quick, just to just put the dagger in that with the old laws and
put the dagger
in the new.
I'm sorry, I'm pasta. I apologize. I was getting into it.
In the New Testament, it says Jesus did not come to. He came to fulfill the law, not abolish the law. So he didn't do away with anything. He just came to recognize them and say, these laws are here. He didn't abolish it. And it said, you will not remove one iota, not one pinstripe will be removed from these laws. So yes, all of those laws still apply, period, end of story. Then you move on from there. And you have to understand that the same God that said thou shalt not kill in the 10 Commandments is the same God that commanded soldiers in Hosea 11 to go in and dash kids' heads upon stones and kill them and rip unborn babies out of mothers' wombs. So it's if we're going to say even if he was real, then we go, do we serve him? Hell no.
Okay,
and
so
I would also
can I respond to that? Yeah.
Yes, you can. I just also want to point out, because I just want to stress that homosexuality isn't unnatural, by the way. It's entirely natural. And as somebody who's studying computational biology, we can actually see how homosexual populations in bees and other organisms are actually beneficial to the actual proliferation.
And if anyone wants tapes of Oz and I, just
entirely, if homosexuality was an issue here, I don't think that natural selection or anything like that would be selecting for this if this is a genetic trait,
and
right?
Pasta sex tape
in every species. So I'm just going to throw it out there. It's entirely natural, and just the fact that the Bible says it's wrong is all you need to know that the Bible's wrong.
Okay, well, I'm going to respond to that and what Austin said. So there is a theory in natural law theory that's referring to function, and there is actually a verse that corroborates science in this respect that says that homosexuality, according to science, is unnatural because of the usage, the function of the reproductive organs. This has nothing to do with morality, and there is even a passage in the Bible that says
is
that
sex
God
only
gave
for
them-
reproduction, though? Is sex only for reproduction? Oz and I have a position called
I would
the
say yes.
Leviticus. Hey, listen, David.
Yep.
If God's commandment is "Thou shalt not kill," why is self-defense or war ordered by God moral? This is from Atheist Cats. Thank you for the super chat, Ken.
Yeah, kill is a word that the word love, for example, appears in the Bible. The same word is used, but the context is what defines what kind of love that is. Okay. We don't say that just killing someone is always wrong. Okay. If I have someone who has a gun to my head and they're going to kill me for no good reason, and I kill them, did I take life? Yes. Was I justified? Yes. What that verse is talking about, killing, is murdering. And there's always reasons why God told people to kill people, and it was because of something that they were doing that was sinful. So in the eyes of God, that would be similar to self-defense. That'd be similar to enacting justice. It wasn't God was just taking people's lives because he was bored and had nothing else to do. So...
And we got one more super chat. I want to knock this one out, David. I hope you appreciate this. What do you think about William Lane Craig saying that Jesus didn't know anything about evolution?
I haven't seen that quote or anything, but I don't know in what context he says that.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it either.
But I would agree Jesus didn't know anything about evolution because Jesus was a man who didn't have that information, and he wasn't the Son of God. So that's
Mike's response. Got it.
I would kind of respond, or I would just kind of go off what Mike said. I don't know.
Jesus was only a man?
No. What he's saying?
I thought I
here.
converted you.
This person's actually assuming that I follow. I mean, I do follow William Lane Craig. I don't watch a lot of his stuff, so I don't know all the things that he says. And like you said, I would want to see what was said in context with this. So I don't know what he said, so I can't really give an answer to that.
Yeah. Oh,
sorry.
Real fast though about the William Lane Craig thing. You said in your closing statement about Michael from Inspiring Philosophy, the consciousness video that you talked about, I'm pretty sure on my channel, Axioms on Trial, we've already gone through that. So after you see David's suggestion of that video, go watch our video where we have a quantum physics professor go through. Oh no, it was the videos he made about quantum physics. That's right. I'm sorry.
Okay. Oh yeah, I did see that one actually.
Yeah. So
yeah, guys, and if you haven't
Shameless-
already,
shameless
shout out
plug.
to Axioms on Trial. That's JMike and Cease to Know's channel. Go over there, hop on over, and hit that like and subscribe. David G, look, I got another super chat. I got to get these super chats out of the way.
Ooh.
So we got David dropping in some dollar bills. What's that? Dollar bills.
Dollar bills, y'all.
So what's wrong with Descartes? I think, therefore I am, as an atheist.
Actually, this is an interesting position that it's actually interesting to me because because I would say the Bible can address this. One thing that I like about the Bible, at least if I'm wrong about God and everything, the one thing that I find very interesting about the Bible is that the Bible has an answer. Descartes' demon, in and of itself, I would say is evidence that the Bible is true. I talked about this earlier with Mike about the Bible that can explain why there's deception. The thing that I find interesting about Descartes' demon is that it's a position that says, I don't know if my mind is being controlled by a demon. And yet you look at the Garden of Eden, you look at demon possession, you look at people being influenced by demons. I don't think that there's anything necessarily that unreasonable or strange about it. But what it causes you to do is to say, well, I can't be sure of anything.
Nope. It says you can't be sure about the ontology. You start with, I think, therefore I am. You could be a brain in a vat. You could be Descartes' demon. You could be deceived by Yahweh, right? Those could all be a possibility. But at the part of starting there is that you're not making the ontological claim that's the case, right? So it's not
right.
Yeah. So
well, is that can you bring up did I misunderstand the question? I might have misunderstood the question.
Well, basically, it's like do you find a flaw in it, or from an atheist perspective, what do you see wrong with that?
Oh, well, nothing. I would even say that would lend further credibility as well to the Bible. I said earlier that God being a conscious agent, he calls himself the great I am.
Well, so,
I just
so
find that ironic.
would you be saying that the I think therefore I am is going to be dependent upon like the ontology of the God? Because what he means in the question is, from an epistemic starting point, from I think therefore I am is just a descriptive statement saying that there's some experience going on. It's not making any claim towards the actual ontology, right? So like, would you find that to be, I think what he's trying to say is, would you find it to be a problem to start at that point in your epistemic starting point, while also admitting that you're not making an ontological claim there? Does that kind of
not necessarily? Yeah, no, I would say not necessarily. One thing that I would say is that a lot of times the people who take the solipsist position is I have a problem with most of the epistemology. I would say that the epistemology of most solipsists does not allow them to find God. Because it seems to essentially make everything reducible to that which you can only see.
Yeah, but an epistemic solipsist from that point is going to be saying that they exist, right? So like,
right.
So that would you would still say that's problematic for the epistemic solipsist that's saying that they certainly exist, but they don't know if other minds exist. Do you still think that's a problem? I think what you're saying is relevant, right? I'm just trying to kind of dig.
Yeah. Wait, if I'm not answering, is that I wouldn't say it's a problem in and of itself. I mean, I would say, I mean, with our existence, I think that there is a shred of truth in that. When someone says that I think therefore I am, but I can't be 100% sure about the existence of others or anything else. I mean, I just talked about, in my opening, I talked about how things only seem to collapse into a solid form upon observation. But before measuring that, they're not necessarily there. They exist as like a wave. And so to say, well, I don't necessarily know for sure that these other things exist as I see them isn't even necessarily a problem in and of itself, because if they truly exist in a waveform and that they don't collapse into this solid object until you observe them, there is actually a shred of truth in saying that I can't know for sure, because everything that I'm looking at right now seems to exist in a different state before I look at it. So not necessarily, but again, I do think that it would limit someone's epistemology to what they can find out to be true.
All right, we're going to move on to the last question of the night, and this is for JMike. And thank you, David, for that. JMike, I got a question from Mr. James Walton. It says, on a percentage scale, I guess, how sure are you Jesus existed? And are you sure he didn't rise from the dead?
Yeah, I'm about as certain Jesus didn't rise from the dead that I'm having a conversation with you guys, and that it's not. I'm a brain in a vat, right? Could be the case. I'm going to say it's probably the last thing that's possible that I'm going to say, right? On the scale of percentage of how sure I am Jesus existed, I'm like a 50-50. I think it's fine that he existed. I would, even if I became a mythicist by tomorrow, I probably wouldn't proclaim it, because I think it wastes time talking about whether or not there's a central figure that started or that claimed to be a god. We literally can see that today with like Satya Sai Baba, or he's not alive anymore, but we can see this in Joseph Smith that had these, revelations. There's so many different things that you can look at that are going to go, okay, yeah, that's, I guess my point's going to be is that it's a waste of time to argue about whether a person existed. I care about the extraordinary claims, because it's not extraordinary to say someone made up a religion or was convinced they were the son of God. I can show you TikToks right now of people that think they're the son of God. Shout out to whatever his name was who thinks he's God from TikTok.
Mark of Legend.
Mark of Legend. Yeah, shout out to him, because
big shout out to Mark. Yeah,
prime example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So.
We haven't seen Mark in a little while. I think he got a bit fed up with TikTok shadow banning him, but big shout out to Mark. He was a good guy.
He realized that he wasn't actually God.
No. I think there's a bit of a play on it there. But hey, look, thank you guys for this wonderful debate. Really appreciate the whole thing. And Ozzy the kamikaze. I talked to Chris Ellery in Rome, and he told me straight up that he is the original Kamikaze Chris, and he puts to the point where he puts the Kamikaze first in front of his name, and that you just being the Ozzy, the Kamikaze. He's saying that there's no point even trying to step to him. That you can talk about that on episode 3 of Atheist Pizza Part 2. That's going to happen in a couple of weeks, or it'll air in a couple of weeks. There's another theist coming down from Alabama. We'll keep his name under wraps, but it's actually going to be 2 theists talking to Oz in this episode of Atheist Pizza, and we're likely going to an Italian restaurant that Chris recommends there in Rome somewhere. So that's going to be exciting. Oz getting double teamed by two Christians with the book of Leviticus lubed up and ready to go. But other than that, Pasta. Yo.
Real quick, hey, Rome, is that the name of the place?
Yeah, Rome is the city in Georgia where Chris lives.
Oh, okay.
Let me get his address. Hold on a second. Let me dox him on air.
Dox.
I'm pretty sure you're not actually going to Rome, but okay. I could.
No.
You never know.
No. So Chris. So let's see what Chris just said. I went to click on his comment here. So this is what Chris says. Oz. No, Chris Kamikaze, former NAWA junior heavyweight champ. Now, heavyweight can be depicted as subjective because I stood next to Chris, and I think he could. I
saw his little ankles.
Yeah, he could have fit
heavyweight.
I could have put Chris in my pocket. So I don't heavyweight. I'm going to disagree with heavyweight, but banterweight maybe.
And Pasta, let me say this. So he did fake wrestling.
It was fake. It was.
I actually fought MMA. So if there's a real kamikaze, his name's not Chris.
No, I've stood next to JMike. I think JMike and Chris could have a good scrap. They could get it because JMike, believe it or not, JMike's knowledge on wrestling, pro wrestling, is very extensive. And JMike and Chris wrestling debate, and the winner gets to actually.
I could debate him old school wrestling versus today's really crap.
Nice.
Yeah, let's get this going. And then the winner
aside from AEW because they're doing great stuff.
The winner instantly gets the to justify that God is either real or not, based on whoever wins the wrestling debate.
Chris just said I'm going to get a very real super kick, and he's going to get put in a very real guillotine as fast as he can say his own name.
If it's a wrestling debate, do we plan me as the winner ahead of time, or how does that?
in near about 80% seriousness. Thank you guys for joining the stream. Everyone that's in the chat tonight, and anybody that's dropped a super chat. Thank you for supporting Oz's Kentucky Fried Chicken habit, and David
Sounds
Gonzalez,
really good right
JMike. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, JMike, I did not send McDonald's to your door.
Yeah, someone sent me McDonald's last night. It was like 1 a.m, and I was just like, my roommates knock on the door. They're like, "There's McDonald's at my door," and I'm like, "God exists," and I have to debate on him tomorrow. How is this gonna work? God, give me one day. Give me just one day. Yeah.
I get a text from JMike at like 2 a.m. It's like, "Hey, did you send me McDonald's to my door?" If so, I think God exists or something like that.
At risk of seeming gross, I just haven't taken it out because this was last night. But this was what was sent to my house, a big bag of McDonald's. So, I ate every single bit of it. It was chicken nuggets and French fries. It was great. I like
to surprise people with food that clogs arteries, but this time it wasn't me. Yeah. You made me feel bad. I was like, God damn it! Now I got to send him some fucking McDonald's.
Backstories. I've shown up to my house with like pizza there, and I've been like, pasta, it has to be.
Yeah, so if it's Italian food, then it's me. McDonald's, it's a toss-up.
Right.
But hey, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Join the Atheist Roundtable if you like. Hit that join. And hop on over again to Axioms on Trial. Give those guys a like and subscribe.
Yes, please do. Thank you. We just did an episode with, if anyone knows Professor Dave Explains, he's got like 1 million subscribers. He just did an episode with us. Yeah, he literally has 1.15 million subscribers. He's a huge YouTuber. He came on, Cease to Know hit him up, and he came on like immediately, like literally a few days after the email. It's a really good episode. Please go check that out if you're interested in like science education and like ways of trying to figure out how to promote science over pseudoscientific nonsense. So yeah, it's a really, really good episode to go check out. Also, anything with like irreducible complexity or arguments for God, the thing that David was promoting, which is inspiring philosophy, like a lot of our content is just going to be systematically going through his videos. So
yeah,
check that out.
You and Cease do a great job of the breakdowns there. But David, where can they find you, buddy?
I have a YouTube channel called The Conservative Christian. You can find me there. I'm trying to work on, thanks to you, Pasta Mike, I'm trying to work on actually making videos on there with the information you gave me to set up my own little rig. Or you can find me on TikTok. My username on there is Sola Scriptura. Soul like the soul, the letter A, and then Scriptura. So
we will drop the link. Oz, get that link in that chat for David. And David, you're very welcome, sir. I've always appreciated your approach to your beliefs. You know, we don't always agree with one another's beliefs, right? We don't have that. Yeah. I agree with him, but at the end of the day, it's how you present it, and I think you present your ideals in a very respectful way. You're not ramming it down people's throats. And you're also willing to come on to a show like this and discuss it with a bunch of knuckleheads like us. So thank you again for coming on, man.
Yeah, I love you guys. So
much
absolutely. And Oz, where can they find you other than blackpeoplemeet.com and christianmingle.com when you're trolling? Where else can they meet you?
You know what? I'm going to be kind. You know where you can find me? TART.live. That's where you can find me. But no, tomorrow night, all I'm going to say is tomorrow night, you don't want to miss it. Infidel Noodle, she's going to be here. That's going to be a fucking amazing, badass interview conversation. And if you miss it, you lost out. Hell and yeah. I'm even to the point where I'm considering once it's done live, it goes to members only. Like, yep. I'm so close to that because that's going to be an epic conversation. So if you're not there,
be here live for it because it's actually coming down as soon as it's wrapped.
Right.
We're talking about an ex-Muslim that's in trouble right now. She's trying to get persecuted by folks. There's people trying to fake her account on TikTok, giving her all kinds of problems. But we got her live on the show tomorrow. Be here for it. It's going straight over to the members only. We got quite a few folks now that have joined TART that are paying the subscription each month. We're putting out content, dropping money back into the channel to actually give some more content to the folks and actually pay. Because otherwise, these guys that are joining the channel, they're no different than anyone else that gets to watch for free.
Yeah, and this is there's no sarcasm deposited at all when I say this, but once you start to listen to this young woman talk about her experience, what she's going through, anybody in America that is a theist of any sort, I don't care what God you believe in, you will reconsider ever saying that you feel persecuted, that you feel like you're attacked, because what they go through across seas and what Christian, being a former Christian in 30-something years, it's nothing. It's nothing. Yeah. And then the absolutely nothing.
Oz, I think that is an amazing thing that you're saying there because that's something not a lot of people recognize.
Yeah, it really is a joke. If Americans looked at what other people go through across the board, you know, there's other people every day across seas that are still getting arrested and put in jail or prison for blasphemy laws. That's bullshit. We're in 2021.
And by the way, I think I can speak for Oz and JMike in this as well, that if the roles were reversed, like if theists, and this does happen to Christians actually, were being persecuted for their beliefs and having their beliefs taken away from them, we'd be having the exact same vigor and approach.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
In that respect, because you're entitled to your belief and you shouldn't be persecuted for it. Unless it involves some form of hate that can be, demonstrated and proven, and that's the difference.
Yeah.
Yep. And then possibly last thing, really quick, I'll say is for anyone that knows any new atheist content creators, and JMike, you and Cease fit in this too. If you want to be a part of it, February 20th, we're dedicating an entire stream to atheist content creators that you've started in the last like 3-6 months, whatever. And we're doing an entire stream dedicated to those channels just to help support, get your name out, turn up the volume, and get more exposure for your channel. Anybody wants to be a part of that, if it's you or you know somebody that wants to be a part of that, email me, austin@tart.live. I think that's going to be an amazing evening on the 20th, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And that's all I got.
If you're under 1,000 subs, or if you're just new, even if you're over 1,000 subs, that's fantastic. I don't know how you did that, if that's the case. But if you're a new channel and you're out here hustling and you want some recognition, we're looking to put you on the channel. Not like that we're anything fantastic or anything, but we're in a position where we feel as though we can give you some exposure. And cross-pollination is something that Oz and I talked about months and months ago. And hence the fact that anybody that's got a channel that wants to push freedom of speech, secular humanism, and any type of discourse or debate that involves an opportunity to have civil discourse like you saw tonight, we're going to promote it, even if it's a belief that we don't even agree with.
Yep.
Yep.
So, JMike, you got something, my man?
Well, yeah, I don't want to pressure you live, but something I'll ask you about the video after backstage.
Sure. Well, thank you everybody for joining the Atheist Roundtable. I'm Pasta Mike. Thank you for coming on in. Mr. Oz Ozzy, David Gonzalez, JMike. Peace out.
Welcome to Let's Get It, the Atheist Roundtable.
That was terrible. Let's do that again.
Pastor Mike, what you doing? What up with Eddie? Why he sweaty on your noodle? I don't get it. He lost his shit. The whole kid caboodle. Now pause. You pause. Everybody tell him that he's a lost cause. Who's the ass in the hat? Half Christian ass. Always talking this and talking that. And Benji on the epistemology. You got claims, got beliefs. What's your confidence? And is it relevant? Nah. Just Jeff. What's next? What text you gonna put to the test? Put to the test, little troll face weasel on TikTok looking like a beetle juice. And what do you do when a member of your crew sits in a shed with the dead? I don't know what's up. Anybody seen P Jump? Now the newest member of the crew. The TART debut. Here's your preview. It's K Nabs. She says she's the live stream queen. Welcome to the team. Yeah. Welcome to the team.
Happy birthday shout out to K-Nabs as well, actually. Happy birthday, K-Nabs.
Is faith a reliable pathway?
57 today.
Hey, yo, Oz, are we going on a deep dive?
Faith is bullshit.
And peace out. Thank you guys. See you next time.
Jesus in the morning.